Somebody got used just to win a bet, so they sought out their own nuclear revenge. We'll get to that in a bit, but first, taking out the trash. Bad relationships are a tale as old as time. They've always been there, and they're always going to be there. Because there are people who refuse to stop being terrible humans, no matter how many lessons are learned. This is not to deter you from believing in good relationships, because those do exist, and I've witnessed a few of them. My parents are the biggest example I have. They always taught my siblings and I to love each other the way they did, and they led by example. In all my 23 years of living at home, yes, I still live with my parents, the economy is depleting, so you can't blame me, I've never heard them raise their voices at each other, in front of us or otherwise. They're pretty quiet people, so they learned to talk their issues out reasonably, and they taught us that too. It was probably the only lesson I didn't learn because I hate confrontation, but I think it's safe to say that I was raised in a family that was full of love and kindness. This story is not about my family though, it's about my relationship with my ex-boyfriend and how I taught him a lesson that I just know he will never forget for as long as he lives. As a kid who was raised in a quiet family, I'm like a hardcore introvert. Somehow that means that I mostly attract extroverts as friends and partners. All of my best friends have been that. And while it gets uncomfortable sometimes, I think it's a good idea to leave your little cocoon once in a while. My love life in high school was a little weird. I was in a friend group that, at some point, we all liked each other, not simultaneously, so it was almost like we exchanged ourselves with each other. It might sound a little weird and swinger-esque, but it worked for us. College was a different ballgame altogether. Dating wasn't even on the agenda for me in the beginning because I was struggling to get my grades up. At one point, I felt really sick and was absent from school for a month. The only way to fix the damage it made in my grades was to attend the summer semester. I took it without hesitation and started the semester. It was there I met my now ex-boyfriend. I mentioned earlier how somehow extroverted people always found their way to me, and that was exactly what happened. We had a few classes together. The first thing I noticed about him was that he was funny. Not in a class clown type of way, but a smart, snarky, and sarcastic way. I enjoyed his humor even when he was a bit disruptive, and after some time, he noticed that I was the only one who laughed at his jokes and approached me. I found out that his name was John, fake name, and we had so much in common, including shows that I was convinced nobody knew about. That kind of got the ball rolling faster, and before I knew it, I was hanging out with him every day and listening to him perfect his pop version of Bohemian Rhapsody by the band Queen. I didn't hate it though. I adored nearly all the things he did, no matter how cringe they were. In retrospect, that was really embarrassing, and I'm glad I know better now. Now, this is an honorable mention, but John was very vain. Like, incredibly and dramatically vain. It was almost comical. He never went anywhere without being overdressed, and he loved his hair. It was a little creepy sometimes. He had more hair products than I did, bought and made use of really expensive hair dryers, straighteners, and curlers, and spoke extensively about hair to anyone who cared to listen. I didn't care too much about that part because he did the Lord's work with that aspect. I still use some of the products he recommended to me because he was just that smart about it. Besides being vain, John was also a liar. I didn't find out until nearly 7 months into our relationship, and even then I was still in doubt about it. He had this sob story that he told when he was in a gathering, or if I was trying to be reasonable about a bad decision that he made and he wanted an automatic out. It was about how he had been born into poverty and had abusive parents, as if that somehow made all of his weird and stupid decisions okay. My own parents had taught me patience and kindness, and the fact that not everyone had the same privileges to have a family like ours. And it made me very sensitive to others. But even then, something about John's story seemed sketchy. But I didn't question it until I found out from a friend of mine that my boyfriend, who claimed to live in a trailer with his family, didn't actually live in a trailer, but in one of the biggest mansions in Texas, where he was from. I felt disappointed at the fact that he'd lied to me, but he lied his way out of the situation and went ahead to give me a super expensive promise ring. I'm a girl who likes shiny things, and that was enough to tide me over for a while. It even seemed like our relationship was getting better. So much better that I started to distance myself from my friends because all my boyfriend wanted to do was spend all his time with me. The phase didn't last long, and soon I was finding underwear that wasn't mine in weird places. Almost as if he wasn't even trying to hide it. I told myself that it wasn't true and I was just being paranoid and continued to live in denial until the signs of his cheating started to show on me. The second I started feeling pain in my lower stomach and when I peed, I took myself to the health center and my biggest fear was confirmed. I had an STD that had been given to me by my dear boyfriend. I was scared and anxious and didn't know how to bring it up. Being an introvert meant that I already had issues with communication. So I suffered in silence until my best friend literally yelled at me to do it. When I did, John did what any man who had been caught cheating would do, and he broke down in tears, telling me how it was a mistake and how he was tempted by the girl. It was all very dramatic, and I couldn't help but laugh. I laughed so much that I cried, and although he was very confused, he didn't let up from the begging and crying. We were there for hours until I shrugged and said that it was fine. I could see the shock on his face when I agreed to let things go, because he never spoke about it or did it again. He was quick to agree, swearing by his life that he would never cheat on me again. When I told my friends that we had gotten back together, they were all very upset with me, talking my ears off until I had a headache. But they had no idea that I had a whole plan to get revenge on John. Telling them about the plan would have made them understand, but it would have also have made me realize how maniacal it was, and possibly have made me back down. I didn't want that at all. I wanted to channel all the anger in my chest and use it to get at him. The new relationship with John was very different from what I was used to. It was really sweet and innocent before, but now he just showered me with gifts and didn't give me any real attention. He blamed it on school and having a side gig as an actor in a locally produced TV show, but I didn't care in the slightest. I just wanted the opportunity to make him pay for his actions. My friends were still not in support of my actions, but I was the only one who knew what I needed to do. John's acting gig did pretty well, so well that he auditioned for a few more and landed nearly all of them. The one he was the most excited about was an ad for a hair product company, and he had the kind of hair they were looking for. Shiny, full, luscious hair that fell a little after the nape of his neck and looked perfectly styled at all times. He was super excited and decided that he wanted to do a series of intensive hair treatments in the coming week before he had to shoot. As his loving girlfriend, I offered to help, and he trusted me to do it just the way he liked. It was 2 days to the shooting day when I suggested a deep condition for his hair to make it even more shiny. He was immediately game, pulling out his deep conditioner and slathering it all over his head and then wearing a plastic shower cap. Normally, you're only supposed to deep condition your hair for 20 to 30 minutes tops, but John, being the man he was, decided that leaving it for over an hour worked better for him. It was perfect for me too, because it meant my plan would work seamlessly. At midnight, when my dear boyfriend was fast asleep, I drove to the local Target and got 2 tubes of hair removal cream and some coconut oil. The deep conditioner he used was coconut scented, and after what I was going to do, I needed to cover up the stench of my sins. I halved the deep conditioner into 2 parts and then replaced the half that I removed with hair removal cream and a dash of processed coconut oil. After very vigorous mixing, the crime had been committed and all I had to do was wait. I can't tell you how hilarious it was watching my boyfriend screaming in horror with lumps of his light brown hair in his hands and the entire middle of his head shiny and bald. He screamed bloody murder and swore to sue everybody under the sun, eventually resorting to just tears after he realized there was nothing he could do. I got it all on video, and I also thought it was funny how he didn't smell the slightest bit of hair removal because that mixture reeked of it. I comforted him the best I could and helped to remove the rest of the hair from his head and even helped to send emails to his manager about his predicament. As expected, he lost the hair gig and a few other small roles he got because of his hair. He was lucky enough to retain a few, but it was obvious that all of the things took a toll on him. Satisfied with the way things were, I ghosted him without an explanation. This is when I explained everything to my friends, and they finally understood the reason why I stayed with him after he cheated. The only time I felt sympathy for John during the entire ordeal was when I was in the middle of mixing his nice little hair conditioner. He had embarrassed me so badly and then given me an STD that very rarely showed symptoms and could have potentially been life-threatening for me. It was the least I could do to take away the only source of personality he had. I know that it's just hair, and it'll grow back, but in the future, I reckon he'll be very wary of who he cheats on. What I just want to understand is, in the end, did this guy understand that OP did this to them, or do they think that it was a weird byproduct of the actual conditioner? Because if he's not fully aware, he might not connect the 2 and 2 that it happened as a form of revenge because he cheated. Our next story is, dude uses me to win a bet, so I trashed his new sports car. We live in a really crazy world where, as civilized as we are, we still knowingly do things to hurt each other. Not as a means of survival or anything, just for the fun of it. I find it sickening that we're the most conscious and enlightened beings on planet Earth, but still, we do things to each other that even the creatures with lower brain power don't do to themselves. The hurt and pain we cause to those around us is on a whole different level, and will most likely be the end of our species. I mean, look at it. The same weapons we created to protect ourselves and keep the peace are what's being used to start wars and cause genocides and stuff. Alright, maybe the war stuff is going too far, so let's kick it back a notch and talk about my personal experience. I once knew a guy I thought I was in a relationship with, let's call him Jimmy, but after 2 whole months, it turned out that all he wanted was to sleep with me to win a bet. Now, if you understood what I just said, you'll get why I started with the rant about humans and hurt. Now, obviously, the pain I felt was unimaginable, but it was nothing compared to the one he felt when he laid his eyes upon his wrecked sports car. But first, let me explain the whole story in detail. I remember vividly the first time I met him. It was a cold, rainy night in February, and I'd just finished a 10-page report for a class assignment. I was hungry, but there wasn't any food left in the fridge. All I had at the time was some cranberry juice and a sachet of half-eaten M&Ms, which I'd left in my backpack earlier that day. As I've said, it was raining and I wasn't about to get some food in the rain. I mean, I had an umbrella and a sweater, but it was too much of a hassle. So instead, I settled for the cranberry juice and the M&Ms. I plopped on my bed, ready to continue watching my favorite reality TV show, Love Island. My roommate wasn't back from classes at the time. I mean, she obviously couldn't still be in class. She'd probably gone somewhere else as per usual. As soon as I flipped open my laptop, my phone buzzed. I had left it on the reading table and I was already getting comfortable on my bed, so the first time I let it go to voicemail. It rang again, and I had to roll off the bed to pick it up. It was my roommate, Cayman. She was at a bar and she wanted me to come over because our mutual friend Tatum had just got her heart broken. I didn't want to go because I'd already committed to my cranberry juice and the M&Ms. Besides, it wasn't new for Tatum to get her heart broken. It had happened so often that it was hard to keep count. Eventually, I decided to go to the bar and possibly grab a bite on the way. Fortunately, the rain stopped just when I was searching for my umbrella. I took the umbrella anyway, the rain could start again anytime. It was a 10-minute walk to the bar. I hated every minute of the journey. The cold was so intense that it seeped through my thick sweater and into my bones. I remember cursing and blaming Tatum for not staying single in college. Anyways, I got to the bar a little later than 10 minutes because I had to stop to grab a bite in the fast food restaurant still open, so I got to the bar in like 20 minutes. When I got there, Tatum was already drunk and swearing off boys for the rest of her life, like always after every breakup. I did my part in consoling her, then I got a beer for myself. Cayman and I started to talk about our day, and before I knew it, we were so deep in conversation that we didn't know when Tatum went on to flirt with some guy at a corner of the bar. When we finally noticed, Cayman hurried over to get her. That was when I turned my sight to the rest of the bar, because I'd been facing the counter since I arrived. When I turned around, I instantly noticed a guy staring at me from the far end of the room. He had a group of friends at the table, giggling and stealing glances at me. I found it weird at first, but the guy was cute, so I wasn't complaining. I turned my gaze back to Cayman as she wrestled Tatum off the stranger, and all the while I was also stealing glances at the guy at the table. After some time and maybe a confidence boost from his friends, the guy stood up from his seat and walked over to me. He introduced himself as Jimmy, and I told him my name. Then he offered to buy me a drink. At that time, I wasn't really in the mood to drink anymore, but I didn't want to reject him. As I said, he was cute. I accepted his offer and we began to talk. He was a final year marketing major and a something minor. I didn't pay attention to that tiny detail. Anyways, we talked for over 20 minutes straight, and I found that he was interesting. There were a few awkward moments though when he jokingly invited me over to his place that night, but thinking about it now, I don't think it was a joke. Anyways, I laughed it off, and when it was time to take Tatum home, he offered to give us a ride. I wanted to say yes, but at that moment, Tatum was unstable and I didn't want her puking in his car, so I declined. So instead, he collected my number and promised to call. As soon as we got outside the bar, I regretted not accepting the ride. The rain started again, and we couldn't get a taxi to take her to her apartment. I brought my umbrella though, so it wasn't that bad. Anyways, we couldn't take Tatum back to her apartment. It was too far, so we took her to ours instead, and she passed out the night on my bed. Jimmy didn't call for 2 days, and because of that, I'd pretty much forgotten about him. So when I saw his call on the 4th day, I was kind of surprised. He told me that he wanted to call earlier, but he had to respect the 3 days rule. What? I mean, I know about the 3 days rule, but I didn't think that some people take them that seriously. I found it weird. Well, he asked me if I wanted to hang out later that day, but I had to decline because I'd already had plans with my study group. Mid-semester tests were drawing close and I had to do some studying. He seemed kind of disappointed, but he said okay and asked me when I was going to be free. I wasn't doing anything the next week on Saturday and I told him so. Then we decided to meet up for a movie date. By this time, I didn't really put much thought into Jimmy. I liked the fact that he looked good, yes, but that's all there was to it. I didn't know him very well. The next Saturday, as promised, we went on a movie date, and after that, we got lunch at a fast food restaurant. There, we had a really in-depth conversation. By the end of the day, I decided that Jimmy was someone I could see myself dating, but not at once. When it was time to go, he asked me if I wanted to come over to his place, which was a code word for do I wanna, you know. I chuckled nervously and told him straight up that I wasn't that type of a girl. I couldn't get intimate with anyone except if I felt a close connection with the person. That was why my friends Cayman and Tatum had a long string of one-night stands and I didn't. He was pissed off, I could tell. That should have even been a red flag at the time, but I didn't think of it that way. But eventually he decided that it was okay and if I wanted to take it slow, he was game. He decided to give me a ride home and I accepted. That was the first time I saw his car. It was a McLaren 570S. My mouth fell open in surprise. I didn't expect him to own such a sick car. By my estimate, the car was worth at least 180 grand at the time. I was forced to ask him if he was some undercover billionaire or something. He just laughed it off and we went on our way. The next few weeks, Jimmy and I started to hang out often and it was great. Even Cayman noticed that I was smiling more and she decided that she wanted to see my new boyfriend. At that point, we hadn't put a label on what we were, so I told her that when he was actually my boyfriend, she'd be the first to know. During that time, Jimmy and I hung out at bars and restaurants, or sometimes even took a walk in the park, or go for a ride in his car. Anytime he invited me to his apartment, I made it up an excuse not to go. It wasn't like I didn't trust him, but he was a man after all. One weird thing happened during our talking stage though, something I should have really looked into, or at least thought about without bias. Whenever we were together talking or just hanging out, I talk about my friends a lot, but he, on the other hand, never mentioned them. Not once. I knew he wasn't a loner because the first time I saw him at the bar, he was with a group of people and they all looked pretty close. Anyways, exactly 6 weeks after we started going out, Jimmy and I officially became boyfriend and girlfriend. And as promised, I introduced Jimmy to my friend Cayman. We set up a double date in one of the bowling alleys close to our apartment, and Cayman came along with her new love interest Marcus. When Cayman laid her eyes on Jimmy, she had this look of surprise on her face. Another warning sign I shouldn't have ignored because most guys Cayman knew were up to no good. When I asked her what the problem was, she drew me to a corner and asked me why I was dating him. She didn't know his name though, but as she said, she knew him by reputation. He was rather famous around campus for being a womanizer. I found that weird because I hadn't heard anything like that from anyone else. Besides, she didn't know anything else about him, not his name, nothing else. She might have mistaken him for someone else. I told her this, and after a while, she conceded and we returned to the guys to do some bowling. But still, even as Cayman had agreed that she could have been mistaken, I wasn't at ease with myself. What if she was right, and Jimmy was just some womanizer and I'm just a part of some elaborate game he's playing? But I found that very unlikely at that time. We've been together for almost 2 months already, and we hadn't been intimate. No player could wait that long. Or at least so I thought. That evening after the bowling date, Jimmy and I bid goodnight to Cayman and her friend, and for the first time, I agreed to go home with him. As expected, events transpired and we, got intimate. After that day, I experienced a drastic change with Jimmy. Day after day, week after week, I'd call him to know if he wanted to hang out or something, but he was always busy. At first, I thought to give him his space because first semester exams were only a few weeks away. And as a final year student, I thought he was busy getting ready. But even after exams, nothing changed. I'd call him and he wouldn't pick up. After a while, I just stopped trying and I decided to give him his space. I had a lot on my plate at the time, and I wasn't going to waste time on someone who obviously didn't want to spend time with me. Exactly 6 days after I decided to stop calling him, Cayman came home one evening, searching the room frantically till she laid eyes on me. I was kind of surprised that she was back because we had just finished our exams, and that was usually the time when Cayman goes for parties, which dragged on for days. She sat beside me and told me she had seen Jimmy at a party, sucking face with some random skank. My heart sank into my chest as I heard this. But Cayman wasn't even close to finished. She walked over to a few guys at the open bar, and coincidentally, those guys were friends with Jimmy. Cayman asked them why Jimmy didn't bring his girlfriend to the party. They answered that Jimmy never had a girlfriend. They explained that the day they saw me at the bar, Jimmy had been bragging that he could get any girl he wanted on campus. But when they saw me and how I was dressed, they knew that I was out of his league and wouldn't allow him to sleep with me. Jimmy had assured them once again that he could get any girl he wanted, and so he accepted a $1,000 bet and set out to prove his superior art of seduction. I didn't know when the tears streamed from my eyes as I listened to her story. As she rambled on and on, one question stayed stuck in my head. How could I have been so stupid? Seriously, the signs were there. All the time when he tried to get me to go to his place, even when I told him that I was demisexual. The fact that for the 2 months that we were together, I never met a single one of his friends. The pain I felt in my heart was so intense, it was almost physical. I wanted to break down and just cry myself to numbness, but Cayman had a better idea. She pulled me from the bed, and we walked outside to gather some bricks around the building. When I asked her what it was for, she simply said, "Revenge." We got to the party a few minutes later, and everyone was still inside the building. Jimmy's McLaren was parked outside, and without a word, came in through the first brick at the windshield. The alarm went off, but nobody could hear it because of how loud the music was at the party. I decided to join her after that first throw, and we busted his headlight, dented the car hood, and shattered the side windows. We had to run away before anyone noticed, but after ruining Jimmy's car, I felt a lot better. Although this guy is absolutely disgusting and what he did is horrid, I'm assuming they probably treated OP fairly well and they probably paid for OP to have some nice experiences. I mean, I don't think this is an experience you'll be able to really get past or forget, but I do think, at least in some small way, hopefully the overall experience wasn't too horrible, all things considered. Never mix business and pleasure. I met Damon as a freshman in college, and he would go on to not only be my best friend, but my business partner as well. It would all come crumbling though, and it drove me to do perhaps the meanest thing I've ever done in my life. Before I get ahead of myself though, let me start from the beginning. Damon and I were classmates at Yale University. We were both computer science majors, and we both had big dreams and bright ideas. We met in a class we shared together. We were very inquisitive and always asked the professor questions. It kind of just seemed to happen that we became friends. There were a lot of things I liked about Damon, but the thing I liked perhaps the most was his drive. Damon was constantly striving to do more, to be more. He had come from little, so he always wanted to prove to the world that he could be successful and do it all through hard work and consistency. In fact, half of our conversations were about how to develop ourselves. His passion drove me to do more too, so he was a pretty positive influence on me. Life goals wasn't all we talked about though. He was very competitive too, and he always wanted to be the best at everything. He would sometimes drive himself to the very edge trying to outdo people, and I had to remind him many times to just calm down a little bit. The funny thing is that when Damon finally chose to wind down, he was a pretty hard partier. Now, I'd like to think of myself as pretty extroverted in social situations, but Damon was absolutely extreme. I almost always had to be the rational friend when we went out to bars or parties. We also spent a lot of time gaming and pranking each other. One day, though, I came up with an idea that would make us not just friends alone. I've always wondered what it would be like to provide tech solutions to people globally and be one of the biggest authorities on tech. Growing up, I'd read inspiring stories of people like Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg, and I always wanted to be like those guys. The thing is, it seemed like almost every aspect in tech already had big names. If I was ever going to make a breakthrough in the tech industry, I needed to find something that not only was in high demand to fix, but something that big tech companies weren't paying attention to. Of course, I shared this dream with Damon, and we resolved that we'd work on this project together if it ever materialized. In my senior year of college, I finally had that eureka moment. I'd been interning at Microsoft and was on my lunch break when I decided to get some food from this little Jamaican restaurant. When I got to the restaurant, there was a pretty long queue there, and I had to wait for so long, I barely had time to eat my meal when I got it. When I got back to the office, I started to toy around with the idea of developing an app that helps sort orders from people around. The obvious solution here would be to just order food using one of a dozen services like Uber Eats, but that wasn't exactly what I wanted to develop. I figured there were still a few people like me who liked to pick up their meals personally. For me, it was mostly because having food delivered robbed me of the one opportunity in the day to actually take a walk around. I figured if there was an app that could be used to order food for pickup from this restaurant that has priority to people within closer proximity to the restaurant, a lot of unnecessary waiting could be cut out completely. You could also select a time for pickup so you could pre-order your meal in advance. When I approached the business with this offer, they seemed to really like it, and so I worked hard to develop the application. Damon worked with me on it, and he showed himself to not only be a skilled programmer, but a pretty good marketer too. He approached a few other small-scale restaurants around and got them on the program. He also was responsible for setting up the incorporation of our new company. To ensure that things stayed fair between us, he resolved that we would both own 49% of the company each, and an independent third part would own 2% of the company. This way, if we ever had a clash about which way the company should go, neither of us would be able to make a unilateral decision. It was pretty challenging balancing school with running the company, but Damon and I made it work. In a pretty short amount of time, we were successful enough to afford to rent office space and get a few employees. After graduation, Damon and I focused on running the company full-time. Since he was more adept with administration, Damon was the CEO of the company, while I was the CTO. To be honest, I really didn't mind it much, and my position permitted me to do what I loved doing best. After a while, Damon came up with the brilliant idea for us to diversify into gaming, which seemed like a weird idea at the time, but after getting some very skilled talents and careful planning for months, we managed to pull it off. We made a free-to-play battle royale game for mobile phones, and it did better than we projected. I mean, it wasn't as big a hit as some of the bigger titles out there, but it was pretty fun to play, and the game was very stable with little bugs. With the company now expanding, Damon and I spent more time as business partners in meetings than we did as friends. We still made time some days to hang out and chill, just like old times. The big rift in our relationship came with Jessica. Jessica was a nice woman we'd once met at a bar. Damon had been very interested in her, and as his wingman, I tried to help him convince her to give him her number. Here's where things get tricky though. Jessica seemed to like me. She agreed to give Damon her number if I agreed to go out with her the next weekend, and I agreed. I gave Damon the number, but I sort of skipped the whole going on a date with her part. I did this because I'd already decided that I wasn't really interested in Jessica, and I only agreed to the date because of Damon anyway. So I'd go on one little date, try to have a nice time, and let her down gently. What could possibly go wrong? Well, what went wrong was that I caught feelings. I caught feelings hard. Jess was not only very charming and beautiful, but we shared a lot of interests and ideals. She also managed to make me laugh all through dinner, and by the end of our date, I was the one asking when we could see again. I had to keep Jess a secret from Damon. I knew just how jealous he would get, and I really didn't want to offend my best friend. He was still intent on wooing Jess, and he often talked to me about how she was playing hard to get and he'd get her soon. Every time I saw him, I felt guilty, but I knew what I had to do. It just felt so wrong to hurt my friend like that, so I kept telling myself that I'll tell him later, and then later I'd say the same thing again. Jessica and I were having an amazing time though. We went on dates, spent time together, and we were on the verge of being official. I decided to tell Damon about us right before asking her to be my girlfriend, but when I walked into his office after work to tell him, he was there looking more raged than I'd ever seen him. It turns out he had been getting suspicious about Jessica and I, and had hired a private investigator to tail me around and figure out what was up. He had received the report from the PI that afternoon. I tried to explain that it wasn't intentional and that I'd had in fact come to tell him the truth, but he didn't believe me, and we had a pretty heated argument that ended with him throwing things around while I stormed out of his office. I knew it would take time for Damon to get over the whole deal, but I expected that after a few days we'd talk it out and we'd be fine. To give him some time to think, I decided not to show up to work for a few days. Then I called him to hang out at our favorite bar, which just happened to be the same bar we'd met Jessica in. The plan was simple: apologize for not telling him about Jessica, and patch things up. However, it seemed like our plans were different. The moment he came in, Damon walked up to me and told me he couldn't really stay. He had a look that was a mixture of uneasy and annoyance in his eyes. So I begged him to please take a seat and at least have a beer with me. The moment he sat down, he said he was disappointed in me, which I honestly understood. But then he asked why I would purposely sabotage a good thing between him and Jessica. He was still convinced somehow that Jessica was interested in him and that I'd somehow hijacked it all and taken his place. Before I could respond, he then dropped an envelope on the table. He looked away as he told me he thought it would be best to deliver it to me personally. When I opened the envelope, my heart sank. Inside were documents showing that he had legally purchased the 2% shares that would give him the majority shares at our company. I could barely think. With this, he could do just about anything with my life's work. He could make decisions unilaterally, and there was nothing I could do about it. I knew Damon. He could run the company to the ground with bad decisions just to prove a point to me. Even worse, he could find a way to have me outed from the company. When I finally looked back to him, he told me there was a way out. I had to sell all my shares and leave the company. That was the only way. I couldn't believe Damon would go this far because a woman rejected him and chose me instead. I left the bar before he could see the tears fall from my eyes. I sold my shares. It was better leaving the company I'd put my all into than to watch my now ex-best friend use it as a tool to hurt me. For the next few months, I was in a state of despair. The only glimmer of joy in my life was Jess, who was simply amazing. One day though, I figured out a way to get back at Damon. He wanted to use my life's work, my baby, as a tool, huh? Well, what if I completely take that away from him? I was determined to make sure that for the rest of his life, Damon regretted choosing to screw me over. The easy part of it was making the decision to destroy the company from the inside out. The hard part was actually executing it. You can't just walk into the office and turn off a few switches. So I figured I had to approach this wisely. First, I developed a very aggressive virus that replicated faster than thought. Then I had to find a way to infiltrate the company. Thankfully, there was a senior developer who really didn't like Damon much and was quite upset when I left. His name's James, and I hit him up to let him know my plans, knowing fully well that I was asking him to not only risk his job, but he could easily decide to report me to the police or Damon. Thankfully though, he was on board with me. Apparently Damon had made a lot of changes since I left, and many of the developers were not happy with the new decisions. As a matter of fact, James himself was looking for employment elsewhere. The last step of my plan could only happen if James was successful. On the day we had planned, James, armed with a flash drive containing the virus, walked into the data center we ran our apps on and infected the servers with the virus. Within minutes, the whole operation was brought to a halt. Angry gamers and businesses that relied on the company started to complain, and many of them even pulled out. The virus was so potent that it even spread to the computers that were connected to the servers remotely. Over the next few weeks, the company descended into more and more chaos. It seemed likely that the company was going to go under till a mysterious company made an offer to buy the company off Damon at a ridiculously low rate. Desperate to at least make a little profit and not lose it all, Damon sold it. What he didn't know, though, was that the company he just sold to was really owned by me. And so I was finally back at my company, this time in full control. It wasn't easy fixing up the mess I made, but eventually I managed to pull it off, and now we're doing better than ever. Damon, on the other hand, not only lost Jessica, but he lost the company and my friendship too. Of course, he eventually figured out what I had done, but not only did he have no proof he could pin on me, but he also couldn't even physically show up to the office anymore. He had lost completely, and he knew it. Do I have any regrets screwing over a person who was once my best friend? Perhaps I would have, assuming he didn't screw me over first. Do I hope we could reconcile? Honestly, no. Perhaps next time he'll be more considerate towards people he calls friends. For now, though, I'm happy with my win. Well, I certainly hope for OP's sake that Damon cannot find this post and put two and two together, because although anonymous, it might have enough details here between the restaurants and the video games to make an exact link as to who this is and take it as a confession. Our next story is, I made sure she kissed college goodbye. I was young when this happened, but I cannot help being proud of how well I put my backstabbing ex-friend in her place. It was a new session when this friend turned enemy transferred to my school. I'd always been the shy girl in class. I hardly had any close friends, and I wasn't interested in making any at first because I had seen the drama that happened with close friends in school and just wanted to keep to myself. I changed my mind about making friends in school when my favorite aunt visited us that summer and convinced me to make new friends. It isn't enough to just have acquaintances, you should make close friends too. After a long talk on the importance of close female friendships and how the friends she made in high school were her anchor, I decided to give it a try. I resumed the new session with a determination to make friends and establish something as deep as my auntie had with her friends from high school. Since everyone already had their friends and cliques, I figured it would make sense to befriend the new students. Luckily or unluckily, I met a new girl who I felt was super brilliant. I was in the drama club and almost always the main character or director, so the chances of becoming the president in the future were very high. My drama teacher absolutely loved me. She let me join in her judging auditions for the roles. The new girl was in the drama club at her former school, so I was happy to show her the ropes and help her find her feet. I even invited her to have cookies and a chocolate drink at my house. My mom was happy that I'd finally invited someone from the school home. The year before, she and my dad wanted to plan a surprise birthday party, but they didn't know who to invite from school. Apart from play dates organized by my parents and their friends and classmates coming over to work on a project of any kind, I hadn't had any friends over just to hang out. My mom had been very worried about my lack of friends ever since. I suspect that she convinced her sister to give me the long pep talk. I honestly never saw my lack of friends as an issue. I had acquaintances everywhere in school, and I spoke to nearly everyone in every clique, and even the popular girls and rich kids liked me. I exchanged greetings with them, sometimes even gossip, but my relationship with them never went beyond a surface level. I made another big mistake in convincing my new friend to join the drama club. I guess I just wanted us to have more things in common. It seemed like a good idea since she was already great at acting. Well, that was what she told me. I noticed something about her that I should have paid attention to but did not. Her unhealthy obsession with the clique of the most popular girls in class. She would always judge them for being too into fashion and not caring about their academics. She especially always talked about one of the girls. She was the most popular one, and her family was super wealthy. My friend hated her for no reason. It didn't even make sense because she hardly knew any of these people. I considered cutting her off at first for her nasty comments, but I just couldn't. She was fun to be around, she was helpful, and I was getting a kick out of introducing her to our school and how things happened there. Not long after, we became very close friends. We were always together in school and even after school. I have 2 brothers, but she was the only child of her parents, so she came over to my house very often for company. We recorded ourselves acting in different roles with my brother as our camera guy, and we posted the videos on my socials. While all this was going on, my friend still swore that she hated the popular girls in school, especially the most popular clique. Still, she especially hated one of the girls in that clique. If you think about it, she's not even as popular as you are. You're one of the most popular girls in school and you don't go about bullying people. I didn't know what to make of that. I was known in school for being in the drama club and all of that, but I was nowhere near being as popular as those girls. It made me uncomfortable how she badmouths them even when it's unnecessary to do so, but she was my friend and I just put up with it. My aunt had taught me the importance of friends, but what she did not tell me was that they had to be good friends. I knew she was a nasty gossip, but I didn't have a problem with it because I genuinely thought she just didn't like those people. It turned out that my friend had been badmouthing me to the other members of the drama club. She wasn't just badmouthing me, she was lying too. She had told me once that she would try and seduce the popular girl's boyfriend and get him to cheat on the popular girl with her. I was horrified and told her it was a mean thing to say or even think, but she laughed and said she was only joking. She told another girl in the drama club that I said that. I noticed that our drama teacher at the time was a little cold toward me. She wasn't as friendly as she used to be, and she no longer allowed me to judge at auditions with her. I had even confided in my friend that I was worried about it, but she assured me that all was well. Maybe one of the students had a problem with you and complained about it. It doesn't matter though, you're the best director and actor in the club, and you certainly will be the club's president. I hugged her and thanked her for her assurance. The next day, I found out that the person who had been bad-mouthing me to our teacher and the rest of the club members was my friend. One of the guys in the drama club asked to see me that morning, but I told him that I couldn't talk to him at that moment because I needed to see my friend and share some good news with her. My parents had agreed to buy me a camera, and I was happy that we no longer had to beg my brother to take videos of us using his camera. When I broke the news to her, her response was, "Wow," and then she went back to talking to others in the drama club. I was shocked at her response. She knew how badly I wanted it, so I expected her to be happier. It was at that point that it occurred to me that my friend was hardly ever happy for me. She never did a little dance or flash a big smile at me when something great happens to me. I knew how my parents and brothers got excited each time I shared some good news. I got very excited whenever my friend told me about the smallest win, so I felt bad when she just dismissed my big news like that. I went back in search of the guy who tried to talk to me, but the bell rang and I had to leave for class. Everything was different after I broke that news to my friend. She avoided me for the rest of the day. I still didn't think much of it. I just went about doing my stuff. My mom used to pick up my brother and me from school, so I would wait under the trees close to the parking lot for my mom. While waiting that day, I saw the guy who had tried to talk to me earlier. He waved at me and I waved back. As he walked toward me, I rolled my eyes. Everyone knew that he had a huge crush on me in the previous session. I knew it too because we acted in plays together, and he treated me differently from the other girls. He never asked me out though, and I never cared. I wasn't looking for a boyfriend at the time. "Hi," he said when he got to where I was. "Hey," I replied, wondering what he wanted to say to me. Maybe he wants to finally ask me out, I thought, surprisingly feeling elated at the idea. I didn't get asked out a lot in high school, and was probably just glad that someone would confess his feelings for me. Well, that day, my emotions went from excitement to disappointment to feeling betrayed. He asked me if my friend and I were okay, and I replied that we were fine. He then went on to warn me to be careful. He told me that she had been going around telling everyone in the drama club about me, and that she had told everyone that our drama teacher was only treating me specially because she was in the same book club as my mother. I was incredibly heartbroken. I went home very sad. I couldn't even eat. I kept wondering why she would do that to me. I was kind to her when she was a new student and knew no one. The next morning, I walked up to her and asked to see her. "Go away, I don't want to talk to you," she screamed at me. I was taken aback. I looked around and saw everyone else was staring at me like I was crazy. "Leave her alone," my drama teacher called out. I looked back and saw her looking at me like I was some filthy thing. I was embarrassed. I ran to the bathroom and cried there. I wasn't sure what my friend had told everyone, but it had to be bad because the others looked at me in disgust. The drama club was my life, but as days passed, I started to feel unwelcome in the club. Everyone looked at me weirdly, especially everyone in our grade. Interestingly, they all started warming up to my friend. She was everyone's sweetheart and they treated her so nicely and delicately. While most people in the club just didn't look at me and avoided me, some others shot dirty looks at me. I soon noticed my friend following the popular girls she hated around. She would even help the one she reserved special hate for to carry her purse around. It was embarrassing. She acted like she was her maid in waiting. I tried to talk to her 2 other times, but she would yell and everyone would turn to us and start giving me strange looks. I gave up on trying to talk to her and tried to focus on drama club and schoolwork like I used to. But drama club had stopped being a great place for me. It was like everyone hated me. I simply stopped going to meetings and stuck to schoolwork. As soon as I left, she started campaigning to be the club's president. I was beyond hurt about it. I cried so much and started to lose an insane amount of weight. My mom had me see a shrink immediately. She didn't know what was happening and I felt too stupid to tell her or my brothers and aunt. I didn't want anyone to think I was stupid for getting scammed because that's what it felt like. I was scammed of my life. My mom came home one day looking incredibly upset. She had just returned from her book club where my drama teacher told her that my friend had reported me for touching her inappropriately. I understood then why everyone was giving me dirty looks. They all thought I was a creep trying to get sexual with her friend. My mom was disappointed that the teacher had not told her immediately. Of course, she didn't ever believe that I could do that. We went to school the next day, and my mom spoke with the principal, who made her apologize to me. She apologized to me in the principal's office, and the teacher made her apologize before the rest of the drama club. While my mom and the other adults felt she had learned her lessons and they had exonerated me, many people still shot me weird looks and they probably felt she was bullied into apologizing to me. Her vile actions cost me my life at school. Even though her chances of becoming the club's president had reduced drastically, I could no longer contest too. She ruined the good reputation I had in school and my relationship with many people. I was determined to ruin her life too, just as she had destroyed mine. I knew the art college she applied to because I had applied there too, and I knew how much it meant to her. I decided to send them an email, telling them all she had done to me and how she had ruined my reputation in school. I realized I needed evidence, so I asked my brother for help. He taught me how to use my camera to record her on video without her knowing. That day, I followed her into the bathroom and asked her why she did what she did. What I expected was an apology. I wanted her to admit all she had done and apologize to me so I could get it on camera, but she gave me something even better. "Because you think you're better than everyone else," she yelled at me. "Why should you get to sit at the auditions with a teacher? Even if they make me apologize before the whole school, you'll remain a loser." The girl who tried to put her hands in my underwear. I could not help myself. I started to cry and he smirked and walked out. My brother was livid when I showed him the video. "There should be something we can do. We can't allow her to ruin your reputation like this," he said. I told him I planned to send it to the art college we'd both applied to. He helped me extract the video and make it into a file. I emailed the college and told them about the pathological liar that had applied to their school. They emailed me back thanking me and promising to look into it. It wasn't enough to do that. I made a video and had my brother cut the video of us into it, then I posted it on my socials. I had a good following in school since I used to make funny videos with my brothers and friends anyway, so most people saw it. Just like that, she was destroyed. She refused to come to school after that. I won. Isn't it sad that this extremely petty and life-altering stuff happens in high school? All because of cliques and social pressures and who you think your friends are? Literally 10 years down the road, when all of that stuff didn't matter anymore, your life path is probably going to be seriously altered because everybody in the story was all caught up with buddy-buddy, clique, Nonsense. I orchestrated my best friend's husband walking on her and her lover. He divorced and left her nothing. The first time I met her was at a party that my boss had organized for his wife's 40th birthday. It was an exquisite birthday party at a beautiful hotel. I had never been to one of those, even though I had dreamed for years of going to one. When my friend advised me to take up a job at the hotel, I was reluctant to do so, but it paid off eventually because I got to meet her. When we eventually became friends, we would call each other M-Girl. We both had the same name, and for years, I rehearsed what it would be like when I eventually walked up to her, stretched out my hand for a handshake, and told her that we both had the same unique M name. I grew up watching her on the TV and seeing her face and that of her families on the local newspaper. Her dad was a popular human rights lawyer, one of those people who took a lot of pro bono cases but somehow was rich. Her mother was an expert dressmaker. She never quite expanded her dressmaking business but was most interested in making clothing for her family. She used to make comments with pride about abandoning a career in designing and tailoring to cater to her family. A comment that irritated my mother, who was, at the time, overworked and tired of being the breadwinner of our family. Her mother did make good clothing for the family. Whenever she and her sister's picture were in the papers or they appeared on TV, they both were always dressed in gorgeous dresses and fine fabrics and colors. They were the perfect family. Her mother was the perfect wife and mother, and her father was a noble man, always there to save the weak and downtrodden. He had come from a wealthy family himself. Her grandfather was a wealthy lawyer and businessman, and her uncle took over her grandfather's company and was one of the richest men at the time. Her dad had declined a career in business and was more interested in learning the law and defending people and their political and social rights. Growing up, I hated myself for not being as rich as she was. My parents should have been rich too. I wish I came from money. My mom ran a small store in our neighborhood, one that my dad almost ran to the ground on 4 different occasions. When my mom was not around, he would walk into the store, pick out his stuff for his 21-year-old mistress, and, of course, he would not pay for it. He was plain irresponsible, and my mom kept making excuses for him. She refused to let the bum go, even when my siblings and I were already done with him, and begged her to kick him out. He stole from everyone, even his children. Our tiny piggy banks were never safe with him in the house. Eventually, my mom asked him to leave. I was 16 at the time, and I heaved a heavy sigh of relief and felt like a heavy weight I didn't even know was there on my shoulder had been lifted. "Pack your bags and leave," my mother had said quietly one day. She had returned from work and saw him kissing a young woman right on the front porch. She drove away and said nothing to them. My dad thought it was business as usual and was unbothered. He simply went back in and continued with his day. That evening, my mom came in smelling of cigarettes and alcohol, and she told him to leave. I was happy for her, but it was too late. She had lost her mind. She let him stay and break her soul for years, and she was unrecognizable after he left. She soon fell ill, and that was it. She died. Did my mom's death hurt me? Yes. But I wasn't sad because I'd lost a mother. I was irritated at the life of a woman who practically lived for a man who did not care about her. Anyway, this isn't about my mom, but my best friend. We were poor. My mom had 4 of us to take care of, and she did it all alone. I watched my sisters and brother make bad decisions and ruin their lives, and while I didn't blame them, I promised myself that my life would follow a different pattern. I may not have grown up in a wealthy family, but I was going to ensure that my children did. I knew just what I had to do to get where I wanted to be, and I knew what I had to use: my beauty. My beauty was, and frankly still is, my biggest talent. Come on, don't roll your eyes at me. Beauty is a talent, for it's one thing to have it, and another to know how to wield it. I was going to make a name for myself. I was going to make money, and I didn't care if I had to be a mistress to 5 wealthy men. I was going to do whatever it took to have a family like one of my best friends that I'd seen in pictures. Years later, I had met the girl I dreamed of befriending for years, and not only was I interested in being friends with her, but she also wanted to be my friend too. Nearly everyone wanted to be friends with me. That was the way the world worked, and I had just had a breakthrough in my modeling career. My friend soon became my best friend. We went everywhere together, and when her millionaire boyfriend asked her to marry him, she asked me to be her chief bridesmaid. All was well with us until I met a young basketball player one summer. I fell in love with him instantly. He wasn't as rich as the men I was used to, but he was young and extremely attractive. "Are you in love with him?" my friend had asked when she caught me staring at him at a beach event. "Yes," I smiled shyly. "I've never felt this way about anyone," I told her. "I mean, I swore to never fall in love, but look at me, falling harder than anyone I've seen in love." "I'm happy for you," she said and rubbed my kneecaps gently. The next few days after, my best friend and I planned different ways to put myself on his radar. A guy that is that attractive will usually have many women chasing after him. "You must never appear to be chasing him," she warned. "Of course not," I agreed. When he asked me out to lunch at the private beach that day, I excitedly told my friend and we planned my outfit. We went on a date and it was nice. He was a perfect gentleman, opening doors, pulling out my chair and listening to me so attentively. I had never met a man who was that interested in what I had to say. The guys I went out with hardly wanted to hear me speak. They were content to just watch me. Sitting so close to him, I became aware of how incredibly handsome he was. He had the tightest jaw I had ever seen. After a while, I asked him if he'd ever considered a career in modeling. He smiled, showing those perfect, even teeth. He certainly had done some work on them, but they looked very real, very fitting of his beauty. He would never consider a career in modeling. "It's just not my thing. I don't like to imagine people staring at me and thinking of sex. It would kill me. No offense to you." He was being careful because I was a model, and I respected him for that, even though I sensed he had more to say. People often think that models are airheads and bimbos who have nothing intelligent to say, but I was going to prove him wrong. Just as I was about to start a conversation that a man like him would consider an intellectual topic, I saw my best friend walk in with her husband. It wasn't unusual for her or her husband to be there. It was a luxurious hotel with great food. It was a place where rich and affluent people would eat. I wondered if I'd told her that my date was bringing me there. "Oh, hello," she called out to us and waved. She then pulled her husband, who looked very uninterested, to our table and introduced the men. "What a pleasant surprise." I managed a fake smile. "You're welcome to join us," my date offered. "No, I wouldn't want to disrupt anything." He smiled, stood, and pulled out a chair for her to sit on. Our table was large enough anyway. Soon enough, they made their orders and my best friend began chatting away with my date. I noticed that she had that special voice on, the one she used when she wanted to impress someone. They soon got talking and chatting away. I stole glances at her husband. Surely he must be annoyed about what was happening, but he barely cared. He was too busy with his phone. In annoyance, I excused myself to visit the ladies' room, expecting that my best friend would come after me. But she was too engrossed in her conversation and laughter with my date to even respond when I told her I was leaving. After that date, he never reached out to me again. The one time I ran into him at another beach event, he merely asked me to say hello to my best friend. I was jealous, and rightly so. She knew I was in love with him, yet she came to our table and seduced him. I decided I was going to forgive my friend and move past it. She probably didn't know she was interrupting our date when she did. She was probably bored. Who wouldn't be? If I were married to her kind of husband who barely gave her the time of day, I'd be bored too. For a week, I barely saw her. Twice, I ran into her at a fashion show. I walked in, but we only exchanged eye contact and left. I invited her to my tiny apartment after the week passed. I was moving out and had been boxing my stuff. The apartment was awesome when I first moved in, but it had become too tiny for my stuff. She looked around carefully and begged me to give her my apartment. "It is just perfect for me," she said. I looked at her as though she was crazy. She and her husband had the finest apartment I'd ever seen. There was no way she wanted to live in my old apartment, and I told her this. "Oh, it isn't for me," she said, grinning like a child. I raised my brow, frowning. "Who is it for?" I asked, wondering what my new hobby my friend had taken interest in and wanted to use my apartment for. Perhaps she wanted to start a book club. Rich bored wives were always starting something new. She said, "Listen, I've done something terrible," whispering and looking around for a listener even though we were all alone. I moved closer to her. "What happened?" I asked, almost whispering too. She then told me that she was having an affair with the professional basketball player. the one I was in love with. At first, I thought she was joking. It just had to be a joke, so I burst out laughing. I only stopped when I noticed the serious look on her face and her pout. Her pout was one of someone who always got everything they wanted and dared anyone to raise an eyebrow. I was shocked. "Are you serious?" I asked, managing to conceal how betrayed I felt. She said, "Yes, I know you liked him, but he was in love with me. He told me that he had been for a while, and who wouldn't want him, eh?" I smiled and rubbed her shoulders. "Okay, honey, well, what about your husband, though? Are you going to leave him?" She looked at me as though I was stupid. Of course not! Not only was my married best friend having an affair with a man she knew I was in love with, but she was also asking to use my apartment for their rendezvous. I agreed to let her use it after I had moved out. That night, I cried myself to sleep. I felt like a serious injustice had been done to me. A month later, I moved out of my apartment and the basketball player moved in. I had become irritated by him. What sort of self-respecting man allows himself to be kept by a married woman? I was going to get my pound of flesh, but was going to take my time. The perfect time to strike came up when I heard that my best friend's husband was looking for an apartment for her. Just as I thought she had grown bored and was now looking to start a book club, her husband intended to give her an apartment for that purpose. He asked me for help while making me promise not to mention it to her. My older sister worked in real estate, so I introduced them. I then told her about my plan to make sure that he walked in on his wife and her lover. I handed her the spare key I had in my apartment. The plan was simple. I would take note of a time when my best friend would be in the apartment with her lover. Then my sister would take her husband there to see the house. He would then run into his wife and her lover. I called my friend one Thursday afternoon and asked to have lunch together. "I'm afraid I can't. I'm engaged in some extracurricular activities," she said, laughing. I was repulsed by her lack of shame. I called my sister. It was time to get stuff done. Just as we both planned, her husband had walked in on her nearly naked, cuddling her lover. He had gotten so violent that my sister had to run out. Before long, he divorced her and left her with nothing. Interestingly, she found out she was pregnant at the early stages of the divorce. But her husband told everyone who cared to listen that the child was not his. Her parents were very embarrassed about what had happened and had pulled strings to minimize the attention her actions got, but word still got out. Her pristine character was soiled forever. I just gotta say that OP's, I'm assuming, ex-friend is either not the brightest or had the most confidence that OP would be a ride-or-die friend if they were willing to go to OP and tell them in private, "Hey, actually I'm hooking up with the person you said you were really into." I just don't understand how they could say that with such confidence, assuming that OP would be completely okay. That said, our next story is, teacher was a jerk, so I got him fired. Back in high school, there was a time I was sure I wasn't going to graduate. That thought usually kept me up at night, because at the time I had the notion that the only way to succeed in life was to go to college, get good grades, and get a job as a corporate lawyer or a hedge fund manager somewhere. But I was so sure this was out of reach for me. Why, you ask? Well, because I had a teacher, we'll call him Mr. A, who decided that instead of trying his best to help the growth of teenagers with the potential to change the world, it would be better to spend every waking hour trying to make them feel like failures. Seriously, Mr. A was a real pain in the butt. Aside from being condescending and arrogant 100% of the time, he was also a racist. He had this mentality of white skin supremacy, and even though he doesn't say this out loud, he shows it in how he treats the white and colored kids in the class. Personally, I'm sure that every night before he goes to sleep, he usually recites and reminds himself of all the reasons why his race is supreme and should be gods of the world. Anyways, this didn't bode well for me and some of the other colored students in the class. No matter how much we tried in his subject, English, we never got A's or B's. And anytime we complained, he usually had one excuse or the other on what we did wrong. If we tried arguing with him, we got detention. So we decided that we had had enough, and we got him fired. Now, I appreciate that our means of getting justice was a bit wrong, but you will all agree with me that he had it coming. Besides, if we didn't do it, our futures were at stake. To better your understanding of the story, I have to start at the top. My mom and I had to move away from Philly because my parents got divorced. When that happened, she actually got the apartment, but she decided that she couldn't stay in it. You see, she caught my dad cheating, and it wasn't his first time. They had settled it amongst themselves before once or twice, but that time was the last straw, and she just couldn't take it anymore. So after the divorce was finalized, she sold the apartment and we moved to a new city. The change was not especially pleasing to me because I had a lot going on in Philly. I was one of the top tier students in my class, and I had lots of friends. I even had a girlfriend, but with the move, we decided that we were too far apart to maintain our relationship, so we had to break up. That wasn't even the worst problem. Even when the divorce trial was going on, Mom moved us out of the house and we were staying at a motel. We had just resumed high school freshman year at the time. After it was finalized, the semester was not yet over, but Mom made us move anyway. So when we got to the new city, I had to start a new school mid-semester. It was either that or being homeschooled, so I decided to start the new school. The next Monday, immediately after we moved into our new apartment, I got up early and got my breakfast. My mom and I didn't talk much that day because I was still kind of pissed at her for not allowing us to stay in Philly, at least until I finished the school year. I knew that it wasn't her fault, and she has a lot to deal with, but still, I was pissed and I couldn't help it. She offered to drive me to school because she had an appointment at a firm where she had applied for a job, and it was on the way to my school, but I declined. I told her I needed to get to school myself so I could get used to the road and the city, and she said okay. I got to school a few minutes before the first bell, and I went to the principal's office for the necessary registration. Then he took me to my first class and introduced me to my fellow students. Then I took an empty seat at the back of the class and had the first class. At the end of the first class, which was physics, I went to the hallway to get my books for the next class, English. As I got to my locker, I turned to the side and saw two guys step out of the physics class. They were both black, like me. They turned to me and waved. I waved back and they walked over to me. Then they said hi and introduced themselves. The taller one was Hakeem, while the other was Dylan. Then they asked why I resumed mid-semester. I didn't want to tell them about the divorce because it was kind of personal, so I just simplified it by saying that there were some issues with the family. They nodded in understanding and asked if I was coming to English class. I said yes and picked up my note. Then we walked together to class. As soon as I stepped into the class, I saw Mr. A looking into a notebook. As he turned his gaze up to face me, I noticed a slight frown on his face. Then he motioned for me to come over. I tried introducing myself, but he didn't seem to care about that. All he asked about was how I think I was going to cope by resuming halfway into the semester. I explained that the situation couldn't be helped, but before I could complete my explanation, he said in a not-so-kind tone that I should have opted for homeschooling till the end of the semester, because he didn't like students dragging him behind with his lesson plan. I was really surprised at his attitude towards me. I was a new student, and I kinda expected that he was going to take it easy with me on my first day. It wasn't like I was looking for special treatment though, but at least. Anyways, I explained to him that English was one of my favorite subjects, and I was going to do the work to catch up to where the class had gotten, if I hadn't gotten there already. We ended the class less than an hour later, but I wish I could say it ended without hassle. I was taken aback by the way the teacher, Mr. A, taught. Throughout the class, he made snide comments and jokes about colored people. Most of the time, he would derail from the teaching flow just to make his joke. And at the end, he would try to cover up by saying that he meant no offense. By the end of the class, I walked up to Hakeem and Dylan and asked them what his problem was. They merely laughed it off, saying that Mr. A had always been like that, so they had gotten used to it. Gotten used to racism? What the heck? I asked them if they had tried to report his behavior, and they said that it was no use. For some reason, the other teachers and students like him, so they don't take any allegations against him seriously. Besides, the last person to report him was a senior who was failing all his classes. He had told the school authorities that Mr. A was targeting him because he was colored. He might have been taken seriously if he was doing well in other subjects, but since he wasn't, they decided that he was just being vindictive. Dylan told me not to worry about it, and that I was going to get used to it soon enough. But that wasn't all. The Friday of that same week, we were having a pop quiz. Like I said, I was a top-tier student in my former school. I didn't get there by spending all my time watching everything DC. Every day after school, I took a few hours of my time to read up on what we had done the day before. And because of this, no pop quiz or test ever fazed me. I finished the test a few minutes before anyone else in the class. And without breaking a sweat, by the time he marked and distributed the results, I got a C. I could not believe my eyes as I stared down at the letter C boldly written with a red marker on my paper. It had to be some kind of mistake, I told myself. So I went back to Mr. A to complain about the result. I could tell that he was pissed that I was bold enough to contest my result, but I didn't care. I was sure I was supposed to get an A on that quiz, and he was going to explain how I got a C. He gave me a bogus answer about technicalities and how he taught his students to answer questions. I didn't understand half of what he was saying, and I told him that immediately. When he continued to defend the grade he gave me, I lost it and yelled at him. To be fair, I was pissed already because my mom and I had a fight at home about something. I can't really remember what it was. He immediately gave me a detention. I could not believe it. I had never experienced anything like that in my former school. I had always known that some teachers could be jerks, but I didn't expect it to be like this. That same day, I complained to Dylan and Hakeem, but just like the other days, they just laughed it off and told me to try to lay low in his class. They explained that it was only going to get worse if it seemed to Mr. A that I was trying to challenge his authority. I asked them what they scored, and they said they also got the same grade as I did. It was obvious that we were being targeted because of none other than the color of our skin. But to be sure, I approached some other white students in my class and asked them how they did on the test. Most of them scored higher than I did. I wanted to report the issue to my mom, but she had her problems, and I didn't want her worrying about me, so I decided that I was going to let it slide and see if there was going to be any change. We had one more test before the exams, and I got another C in that one. Then after the exams, when the results came in, I was shocked to find out that I didn't even stay on a C, but I dropped down to a D. I was so bitter about this that I contemplated going to the principal myself to report Mr. A, but my friends told me not to because he wouldn't do anything about it. Besides, Mr. A could always blame the fact that I resumed mid-semester and couldn't catch up with the rest of the class. By the end of the day, I decided that I was going back to Philly. I just couldn't keep failing in English class because the teacher didn't like me. It didn't make any sense. My dad still lived in Philly, and even though at that point he knew I hated him, he was still going to let me stay in his place. I don't think it needs saying, but I wasn't thinking straight. When I got home, I realized that if I decided that I wanted to go back to my dad's, I was going to leave my mom's heart broken. And even though we had our differences, I wasn't going to do that to her. Instead, I was going to tackle my problem head on. I had the whole summer holiday to think about it. It was obvious that if I wanted to go through the legal procedures, I had to make a really strong case against Mr. A. And even if I did that, there was still a chance that the school authorities were going to rule against me. So I knew that the only way to get the justice I and many others deserved was to take the low road. A few days after we resumed for sophomore year, I had the plan all mapped out. All I needed was help from my friends. I rode my bike to the basketball court a few blocks away from my apartment. That was where Hakeem and Dylan spent most of their weekends, because they were on the basketball team. As expected, I met them there and I told them my plan. They wanted no part of it at first, but I explained that all I needed from them was to help me get some supplies. By supplies, I meant a bottle of gin. Then, one day during lunch break, after Mr. A left his office, I told Hakeem and Dylan to be on the lookout while I snuck into his office and picked the lock of his drawer. Then I dropped the bottle inside and hurried out. The initial plan was to put some into his water or coffee or whatever he was drinking so that he could fail the breathalyzer test, but his table was clean, no water or drink in sight, so I had to improvise. I sent an anonymous note to the principal saying that I saw Mr. A drinking from a bottle of liquor the day before. Because I said the day before, it meant that even if he had passed the breathalyzer test, the fact that the bottle was still in his drawer, it meant that maybe he didn't drink that day he was caught, but he did the day before. The principal, along with the janitor, went to Mr. A's office and told him of the letter. He promptly denied it and even went as far as telling them to search his office. When they checked his drawer, they found the half-empty bottle of gin, which I had hidden. I wasn't close to the office at the time, of course. I didn't want to arouse any suspicion in myself. Instead, Dylan stayed close to watch the event unfold. Mr. A was summoned to the principal's office, and after a few minutes, he went back to his office to grab his things. It was later announced that day that he had been indefinitely suspended, and we were going to be having a substitute teacher in the meantime. Once again, I wasn't proud of how I got rid of Mr. A, but all is well that ends well. In an event like this, where you know a teacher is so biased and racist, and you manage to find a way to get them booted, would it be so hard to hold back from just dunking on them with that knowledge? Sending them some kind of see you later message or something? Or is them just being gone good enough as it is and satisfying enough? I'd like to know what you guys think, why I couldn't forgive my husband. I was one of those people that like to rant, I love love on Instagram. I could even pass for the head of the awing association of the world. Love, to me, is the most important thing in the world. So when I found love in college, I wanted it to last for a lifetime. But something amid everything didn't tick all my boxes. But I love to agree that perfect love doesn't have to be perfect. The day my mom met Dave, she saw deeply into his soul, but I didn't like what she saw. 10 years later, I wish I listened to her words. Sunshine, if you want to keep shouting I love love, then look past this fine young man. He's not the man for you. I'd listened to my mom all my life. But when I stared right back into her soul after those words, I knew she didn't understand that Dave was the man for me, and there was no going back. Why shouldn't it be Dave? When I met Dave, I was drowning. Everything, including myself, seemed to be against me. My grades were dropping, and my life was a flip-flop. I never thought I would be heavily depressed at 20, but there was I in the midst of chaos and fear, hoping for someone to seek me out, to see me and rescue me. And Dave was that person who did. He was just an ordinary man whom I saw as extraordinary. At first, it wasn't love that I felt, but when he dropped pink sticky notes on my books to tell me I was the prettiest girl alive, when he picked me up on most cool, breezy evenings to go skiing, and took me from one resort center to another when I wasn't busy with schoolwork, and all that he did to win me over, it became love eventually. You know what they say about love turning ordinary lives into a fairy tale? That was what I felt, a fairy tale. That fairy tale was what I used another 10 years to protect. Of course, I knew Dave wasn't perfect, but I married him anyway. I knew he didn't have to be perfect to marry him, but I shouldn't have ignored the red flags. When we were in college, I knew I wasn't the only one Dave was seeing, but he made me feel like I was the main chick, and every other girl was a side piece to him. How hilarious. That was against my ethics, but Dave was a sweet man and he didn't rob it to my face that he went out with other girls. He called me his painkiller, and I felt special to have such a huge accolade from him. As far as I was concerned, I was ready to bend my rules for this man who treated me like a queen. What I didn't know was marriage tends to escalate bad habits. I didn't realize I had settled for less just because I felt no one could treat me better than Dave did. It became worse when we had Lisa and Liam. I begged Dave to stop, to change, anything but that lifestyle. Dave made it clear to me that he'd always been like that, and he doesn't see anything wrong in going out with other ladies occasionally. He wondered what changed. He said I didn't really care in the past. I didn't care because it used to be just you and I. But we have Lisa and Liam now, and they see everything. I told him one summer Tuesday when I couldn't take it anymore. It wasn't me who changed, it was he who began to rob everything on my face. Yes, Dave made it obvious that it wasn't only me who should have his attention and love. On the flip side, it wasn't just about the kids, it was also about me. I felt threatened by the other women in his life. I was gradually slipping right into the darkness I was in before Dave saved me in college. My friends once accused me of loving the wrong men. Even though they were right, I hated them for it. Steve was the man who drove me into darkness before Dave came along. When you talk about the devil, you talk about Steve. He was the first man I hooked up with in college, and trust me, I was really hooked. He was everything but sane. I didn't know how, but he got his way easily with ladies. He had access to highbrow words that could get a girl to drool for more. His 6 feet tall, slender body easily attracted comments like a tall glass of wine, and his skin is the definition of caramel and white. His hair is a perfect cut-in blonde, and the way his face, which houses his sharp pointed nose and his blue eyes, sits gallantly on his long neck, is the perfect deceit for a girl who wants to be deceived. I mean, Steve redefined beauty, and everything about him was simply giving. In the first few months of dating Steve, I felt everything was pretty cool for an ideal relationship. He made time out for me, and he showed me off at every given opportunity, but I had to deal with comments like, "Oh, you're the new catch, enjoy," and I would naively say, "Sure, I would," with a wide grin on my face. I seemed to be the only one who didn't know Steve was every woman's catch. He was for everyone and no one in particular. When I noticed the harem of women around him, I became worried. I had thought my first love in college was going to be it, but I was wrong. It was easy for him to call those girls exes or the girls who were trying hard for him to notice them. When I looked back at how much I believed him, I wondered if there was anything like a love spell because I was definitely under a spell. With Steve, I managed to walk away. I knew I couldn't be with him and I accepted it. Everyone expected me to do the same with Dave, but I didn't. When I chose Dave, he wasn't that guy that gave off the possibility of having multiple women. He was always by my side. And I truly felt I hit a jackpot when he asked me to be his girl. And when I noticed I wasn't the only one he had, I was already in love with him. I should have left, but I didn't. Love became my perfect alibi. I didn't know why I settled, and it hurt that I did. I felt a perfect love doesn't have to be perfect. Unfortunately, I didn't even have a perfect love. I had almost no one to confide in because everyone I had didn't want me to marry Dave. I remember when my best friend Palmer told me that not every good guy is fit for one to marry, and that not all fairy tales should lead to forever. I smiled shyly, the way I like to smile when I know my mind is fixated on something. I didn't know what to do. I gullibly believed I was going to be Dave's painkiller for life. I hated the word painkiller. I couldn't blame myself for feeling so. Dave made me feel entirely special all through our dating period. He was a perfect gentleman, and no one could convince me that he wasn't the perfect man for me. When I looked back at how my life with Dave played out, I realized that I didn't have a healthy self-esteem. My mom saw that I wasn't choosing the right man and she tried to protect me. Eventually, my mom encouraged me to file for divorce, but her illusioned daughter believed in fairy tale endings. I did everything I could to put the home together, but I did it for the wrong man. Along the line, I recommended a therapist and a counselor for Dave and me. I thought that was going to bring equilibrium to our marriage. At first, Dave was all about it, but eventually he went back to the old ways. I was dazed when he encouraged me to take on other men too. I broke down in tears because I didn't sign up for an open marriage. Because I didn't want a divorce, I began to lose valuable relationships. My friends thought I'd lost my mind completely. They didn't understand why an American like me would want to stay glued to such a man as Dave. My excuses irritated them, and my excuses irritated me too. I took solace in the fact that Lisa and Liam's faces lit up whenever Dave was around. He wasn't the best dad, but he had a thing with the kids. He had a way of making Lisa chuckle and Liam jump about. They had a bond, and I didn't want to take that away. Although I wanted him to be more available for the kids, I still appreciated the little time he gave. Yes, I had to appreciate the father of my kids for making out time for his children. I hated to admit that I would eventually file for divorce, but Dave's negligence was the last straw that broke the camel's back. Aside from keeping numerous side pieces, he neglected the kids and me on numerous occasions. He worked hard but cared little about his family. The Dave I met liked to take good care of his own. He had such a huge sense of responsibility, and it hurt so much that he allowed other women to take that part of him away. His attention was everywhere but his home. I had the desire to protect Lisa and Liam from the agony I went through when my parents got divorced. I kept making excuses for badly behaved men because I looked for a father figure in the men I dated so badly. I didn't want that for Lisa, and I wanted to protect Liam, so when everything fell apart, I was in so much agony and pain. Sadly, that desire was short-lived when Liam died in my arms when Dave was out on one of his numerous escapades. I realized that the best protection was to have filed for a divorce a long time ago. I was filled with so much resentment and hatred. I hated the day Dave walked into my life, and I hated much more that I allowed him to save me. I should have drowned in my darkness because I couldn't bear the pain of losing Liam. Liam was so precious to me. At 7, he wanted to protect me and his sister at all costs. It was adorable to see him squeeze my hands warmly so I could feel that he was there for me on gloomy days. He was both sensitive and smart. He made chirping noises all around the house, and he was the rainbow that brightened our home on most cloudy days. And now, Liam lay lifeless in my arms. That morning before the incident, Dave was expected to be home so that we could take Liam to school to watch him play baseball. Dave had sworn to be available, and I looked forward to sitting beside my husband while we watch our son play his favorite sport. Liam was in no mood for the delay as he dashed into his father's bedroom to tell him he was ready. When he wasn't there, he ran frantically around the house calling his dad with all intensity. In a bid to be sure that Dave's car was still outside, Liam ran out without looking. My Liam slipped and hit his head on the tiles, and I wasn't even there to save him. Neither was Dave. Everyone said it was an accident, but I knew that Liam died out of negligence. I couldn't forgive that. I just couldn't. I hated that I had to seek revenge against my son's dad, as all I wanted was a quiet divorce. Dave had hurt me so much over the years, yet I didn't see the need to avenge myself. But when I saw what happened to my son Liam, I knew the closure I needed would be provided on a platter of revenge. The pain I felt was second to none. In a flash, my life had changed. I was both a mourner and a broken woman. If only Dave was home that morning, if he hadn't gone out to tend to one of his mistresses while he neglected his own home. I got separated from Dave, and karma took the wheels of revenge for me. Indeed, the universe listens. When I filed for divorce, Dave fell sick. I didn't see it coming. Although he lived a reckless life, he was a healthy man. It started with a mild swelling on his neck, and then the swelling got bigger. Everything was happening so fast for him, and he couldn't process everything in a glance. He suddenly became a changed man. He acted all remorseful and available, but it was too late. I waited for 10 years to build happiness with him, but all he did was cause me intense pain and regret. When he got diagnosed with cancer of the lymphatic system, he suddenly realized he needed his family by his side. The day Liam died was the day the marriage died, and the perfect revenge for me was to leave without looking back. Dave deteriorated faster than the doctors could explain, and I had to send Lisa to see him out of courtesy, not sympathy. I was surprised at the woman I became. I felt so bad that a huge chunk of the real me had been lost to the bad marriage I experienced. Dave was left at the mercy of caregivers, and I wished he could feel half the pain I had felt all these years. The pressure to cancel the divorce proceedings was much from family and friends, but I remained resolute. I wanted Dave to know what it felt like to be abandoned, let down, unloved, betrayed, and deceived. Thankfully, Dave survived cancer. That was a plus on my side because I began the divorce proceedings in full force after a few months. Dave was apologetic, humane, and everything nice, but I wasn't there anymore, or I was simply consumed by the quest for revenge. I was determined to spend the rest of my life being a baby girl. I was going to heal and love myself enough to choose right. When I saw that I paid Dave back in his coins, I felt peace in my heart. Until I'm old and gray, I'm going to continue to shout, I love love. Until the universe blesses me with the love that is just for me, I will continue to awe at other people's good love stories. The day Dave and I officially got divorced, I knew I was going to spend the next decades of my life choosing what and who is right for me and living right. This is definitely up there in one of the more devastating nuclear revenge stories. I would even go to the length of saying that maybe it's not even nuclear revenge, it's just what OP should have done and did do. I mean, I give OP a lot of kudos for having the resolve to stick through this and not let something like Dave's situation distract them from what Dave's done and why things are where they are. Our next story is, I dated my ex's boss and got him fired. My ex was an arrogant piece of crap. I still sometimes wonder how I allowed that demon anywhere around me. The fact that I once called him my boyfriend nauseates me. I was in college when I met him, and it was difficult for me. I had just finished my junior year and was struggling to get a job to save for my senior year. I got a job at a prominent restaurant in the city, and the pay was great compared to what many other food establishments paid their staff, but it was a very stressful job. The restaurant was right in the heart of a very big city, and the food was good. My boss made sure of that. He even joked around that the reason he decided on a restaurant was that there were too many restaurants that served tiny portions of food and charged diners exorbitant prices. But their food tasted like paper mixed with garlic. Again, my former boss said this, not me. Our restaurant was always fully booked and was frequented by the who is who of society. Actors, singers, movie producers, famous novelists, businessmen, and the like were often present at the restaurant, treating themselves and their friends to a nice meal. Whether it was mornings, afternoons, and nights, the restaurant was always fully booked. I barely had time for myself. I also had to take up extra shifts too. I needed the money. 3 months before the school year ended, my parents called me to inform me that they would not be able to support me financially in my senior year. My mom had been fired unjustly as a school teacher, and she didn't have any money to hire lawyers and fight back. My dad had only just retired and they had to save money. Also, they had to take financial care of my sister, who was still in high school at the time. I took up the job so I could use the money to pay for tuition and other stuff when the school session started. 1 month into my job, I realized that there was no way I could make enough money to cover my senior year working in a restaurant for 3 months. It was very frustrating. I told my coworker, a very beautiful girl who was just 2 or 3 years older than me, about my situation while we were having a chat one rare, slow evening. She had gotten a job at the restaurant immediately after she came to the city and had been working at the restaurant for a year. She was very ambitious, and if you spent time with her, you could tell that she already saw herself walking on different runways and winning hundreds of beauty pageants. She worked hard at the restaurant, but she was certain that she wouldn't have to work at the restaurant for much longer. She was going to be a top model. I sometimes got jealous of her daring personality and her determination to succeed. I knew she would make it as a model. She was beautiful anyway, and she had just the body that was in demand. You really thought you could pay for senior year in college with a 3-month salary here? Her facial expression went from shocked to amused to sympathetic. She reached out and held my hand, and then she squeezed it and let go. "Honey," she said in her accent. She tried very hard not to let on that she has an accent when speaking, and it made me feel special that she let her guard down around me like that. Nobody gets ahead in this city by waiting tables. You need the money from the restaurants as supports of sorts, but you need other kinds of money too. I looked around suspiciously, but only because she did that first. Then I showed her from my expression that I had no idea what she was talking about. "You need a sponsor, honey." I said, "No, that's not my thing. I wouldn't even know how to behave around a sugar daddy. I may even end up falling in love with him." She laughed and said, "Who said anything about a sugar daddy? Get a rich boyfriend, period. Maybe he'll be nice enough to loan you some money. That's cheaper than getting a loan from the government." I smiled, but I decided that I was not going to take her advice. I would probably be too embarrassed to ask a guy I was dating for money. I'd only ever asked my boyfriend for a loan once, and it was in my freshman year when I was dating a basketballer. I saw a beautiful dress in a shop's window and fell in love with it immediately. I was going to buy it, but I didn't have any money with me and my credit card was back in my dorm room. I feared that it wouldn't be there if I returned the next day. So I walked out to my then boyfriend and whispered in his ear that I needed a quick loan. I noticed the smile that danced on his lips when I asked. He looked as though he was happy that I asked and proudly fished out his credit card and gave it to me. Everything changed, however, when I met my ex-boyfriend. He was in his later 30s and was quite physically unattractive. He looked fierce, but when he asked me out at the restaurant and I told him I was going to be busy the next evening, he offered to pay for my shift, and I accepted his offer. We went out and he seemed lovely. He had quiet confidence around him, Something that I learned later was simply arrogance. I had never been with anyone that old, but I was willing to try because I genuinely liked him. We went out every night that week. He worked for a popular actor as his manager. The actor seemed to pay him well because he had a lot of money and was also well connected in society. He hardly had time to see me the week after, and I didn't like that. He didn't either, so he asked me to move in with him. I protested that we had just met, but he kissed me and said, "I'll have the driver arrange for them to move your things." I thought it was weird that he just said that with a note of finality, but I also thought it was romantic. So at the end of that week, I moved into his apartment, which was in the middle of the city. I enjoyed living with him in the first week. Perhaps this was because he wasn't at home in the first week. He had gone on a trip with the actor. It wasn't until he returned from that trip that we hooked up for the first time. I knew that night that he was a selfish lover. I enjoyed being with him, experiencing a different love life than I was used to. I wanted to try something different anyway. "I don't like returning from work and not seeing you at home," he said to me one evening as I changed from my waitress uniform. I sighed and said, "It was a busy night at the restaurant. An actress booked the whole restaurant for her birthday, and we had to cater to the wants of actors and famous faces." "Don't go back," he said. "Just stay here and paint. You paint, don't you?" I nodded and resigned the next day. Having my ex make these decisions for me didn't bother me at all. I'd been making the important decisions all my life, carefully examining how every decision might affect me. I liked that with him. I could be very reckless. With time, it became easier to ask my ex for a loan. He gladly obliged and told me it wasn't a loan. "I'm giving it to you," he said when I thanked him for the loan. "It's a gift," he said and kissed me on the cheek. I resumed my senior year and still lived with him. My aunt had a house on campus since she was a staff member. I stayed with her on weekdays, but on weekends, I left for my ex's apartment in the city. My ex soon bought me a car, and life was good. Except for his continuous absence and angry outbursts sometimes that I chose not to pay attention to. I made excuses for him. He was probably stressed working with many famous people. After graduation, I decided on staying in the city and looking for a suitable job. When I told my ex about my plans to find a job in the city, he kicked against it. "I like to return home and meet my woman," he said with a frown on his face. "What?" I asked him, as though I didn't hear him. "I like to return home and meet my woman," he repeated, daring me to disagree. I said that's not possible. "You know I've always wanted to work," I stammered, hating myself for stammering, being so intimidated by him. For days, our communication was bad. Not that we ever really communicated anyway. His stance was clear and final. I could not work. I was angry. I'd allowed him to control me for so long, and he had forgotten who was in charge. I too had forgotten who was in charge. He went with his boss to a filming location, so I started looking for jobs. I checked newspapers and magazines and talked to the very few friends I had in the city. Eventually, I found a job as a junior art curator at a gallery. The gallery was very close to my ex's apartment, and this made me happy. Perhaps he wouldn't throw a fit if he knew I worked very close to the house. When he returned, I told him about my new job in a quivering voice that irritated me. He was mad at me. "That can't happen," he thundered. I'd been sitting close to him on the couch with my legs on his lap. He pushed my legs away, causing me to nearly fall from the couch. I was startled. "It's just a walking distance from the apartment," I said in that quivering voice again. "I don't want you working. Simple. You can't tell me what to do," I cried. I realized at that moment how small I was. He was taking advantage of how young and inexperienced I was. He was taking advantage of the gratitude I felt for what he had done for me. I'd always wanted to work. It never made sense to me that a woman would not make any money. I believed that women should make money regardless of how little it was. A week after our little quarrel, I told him I was ending our relationship. "Trust me, doll, you don't want to mess with me," he said with an edge to his voice. "Are you threatening me?" I asked, glaring back at him. He turned away from me and I went into the bedroom we shared and started to pack my things. My waitress model friend from the restaurant allowed me to move in with her for the first month. Her house was very uncomfortable for me, given that I'd just left a very comfortable, luxurious apartment. I had just gotten to work one morning when a mailman called my name, and when I answered, he handed me a letter. The letter address looked familiar. It was the name of a law firm popular in the city. It turned out that my ex had told his lawyers to send me a letter asking for the money he lent to me to pay for my senior year in college. I was alarmed. Is this how he wants to pay me for ending my relationship with him? I asked my friend later in the evening. Unfortunately, that's how these men work. They're rich and powerful and would use these powers as they wish. She kissed me on the cheek and left for work. That night, I thought long and hard about how to get back at my ex. I didn't have that amount of money, and even if I did, I would never give it to him. If he was a rich and powerful man, then other even richer and more powerful men could help me take him down. I remembered then how he would complain about the actor he worked for and how he was a rich brat. My friend had found her way into the different networks of rich and powerful men in the city, and I was going to need her help. At the time, she was seeing a movie producer. It was a very quiet relationship because he was married. I asked her if she could ask to meet the actor, and he agreed. She set up a meeting, and soon enough, I met the actor my ex worked for. One thing I have never doubted my whole life was my beauty. I knew I wasn't so book smart. I never had an A in college. I called myself an artist, but I could barely paint a good picture. I was beautiful, and I was determined to, for the first time, use my beauty to my advantage. I met the actor, and as I expected, I managed to seduce him. I wasn't surprised at all that he didn't know me, seeing as I worked for his manager for a while. My ex never introduced me to anyone. I think he was too terrified to allow me to see other better-looking and richer men. He was also scared that they would see me. I didn't try to pretend that I was a fan or just some thirsty girl who wanted to get down with a celebrity. I told him that I needed his help and that someone was trying to take advantage of me. He listened to my story and promised to do something about it. He did confront his manager, and I guess that confrontation led to my ex unburdening his heart. The actor told me later that my ex said a lot of foul things to him when he confronted him and had even tried to hit him. They'd been having issues, but mine was the breaking point. He was going to pay my ex back the money he claimed I owed him, but he decided that he was going to pay more expensive lawyers to battle in court. His manager was terrified and withdrew the letters immediately. Of course, I'm not fooled to think he did it for me. I was smart enough, even then, to know that men will do nearly anything for their egos, and I used that knowledge to my advantage. My ex was sacked, and for a while, the actor and I were together. I had to end the relationship when he refused to go official or be seen with me in public. Well, I definitely think this highlights the good and bad of this situation if you are capable of getting into one. They'll use that money to make you swoon or do things, and as soon as you want to break that up and go your own way, I'm sure they'll be more than happy to use that money to make you feel miserable or try to put you back down to the level you were before you got with them. This next story is, bully humiliates me at a party, so I got him suspended. All my life, I've been a scared little boy. I was scared of everything. People, animals, places, even food. Not all types of food though, just the ones I'm allergic to, like pineapple and sesame. People say it's wise to have a healthy dose of fear, but I can't really tell if my dose of fear is actually healthy. Sometimes when I was 9, I listened to a podcast from a doomsday preacher, and I was convinced that the world was going to end on a certain date. I can't really remember the date right now, but because of that, I made sure to spend all the money I was saving for a new pair of Heelys on junk food and arcades, then told my parents goodbye one last time. The next day, to my surprise, nothing happened. Well, except for the fact that I woke up with a bad stomach ache and no savings. I say all this to show that I had lots of fears in my life, but the one thing I feared above all was public humiliation. It happened to one of my friends in middle school. His name was Will. Some 8th graders decided to play a prank on him, so after gym, they stole his belt from his gym bag, and when he couldn't find it, he had to go to class with a pair of loose pants. Then during the lunch break, they approached him and pulled down his pants, revealing his Toy Story-themed boxers for everyone to see. As I said, this happened to a friend of mine, but I couldn't help but cringe from the secondhand embarrassment. By the end of that school year, Will transferred to another school, something he had the luxury to do because his parents were separated and he had the option to choose whoever he wanted to live with. I don't have that option. If I suffer that kind of humiliation, I was literally going to die. Well, at least that's what I told myself. During my sophomore year of high school, I was invited to a party where I suffered the worst possible humiliation. I didn't die. Instead, I got my revenge. But let us start at the top. After my freshman year of high school, my dad decided that we had to move. He had just been offered a new position at work, which came with a considerable raise. But that catch was that he was going to have to uproot his life from New York and move all the way to California. This was a hard decision for the family because our whole lives were in New York. Mom and dad were both born there. Their parents lived there. Mom had a small clinic where she worked as a dermatologist, and all my and my older brother James's friends were there. But Mom decided that it was a good idea to go. She explained that Dad's career was really important to the running of the household, and since she could practice anywhere, it wasn't really a big deal. Besides, living in LA was way cheaper than in New York, so James and I could finally get separate rooms. During the summer holiday, we moved to our new apartment. It was nice and spacious as expected, and there was a basketball court a few blocks away, which James got really excited because he plays basketball for our previous high school. A few days after we moved in, we got settled and even made some new friends in the neighborhood. Less than a month later, we resumed school for the new session. On the first day, I took some extra time to groom myself because I wanted to make a good first impression in school. I changed my outfit more than 3 times before I decided to go with the initial one. Eventually, James decided that he wasn't going to wait for me, and so he left. I got to school later, and as is typical with new students, I didn't have anyone new to talk to, and it was kind of lonely. James, on the other hand, was a people person, so he didn't have that trouble. During lunch break, I ate with James and we discussed about our first day experiences and stuff. The next 2 days were better. I found some students in my advanced placement English class and we hit it off. During tryouts, James did really well, and he got into the basketball team. He wasn't really interested in joining at first because he wanted to take more time studying. He was in his senior year of high school, and he wanted to get a perfect GPA so that he could qualify for a scholarship. But my dad talked him into trying out because he knew that he loved the sport. Besides, he was already so smart and he was surely going to do well in the final exams and SATs. A few weeks after we resumed, I went to join my friends from AP English in the cafeteria. We were having a discussion about one of the books we had to read for a class, and we got so immersed in it that I didn't notice that someone was behind me. Eventually, someone tapped my shoulder and the discussion stopped. It was a guy I had seen in the hallway once or twice. He was also a sophomore, but he had the physical appearance of a senior. Behind him were 2 other guys, and they had mischievous grins on their faces. I just knew that they weren't up to any good. The huge guy introduced himself as Max. I tried to introduce myself, but he waved me off and picked up my turkey sandwich. I told him firmly that it was mine and he wasn't allowed to eat it, and he threw me a surprised look, as though he couldn't imagine that I was standing up to him, well, sitting down. One of my AP English friends, Jordan, told me to just give it up, but I didn't listen. I never got bullied in my former school, and I wasn't about to bow my head and let some jerk do as he pleases at my expense. Max tried to throw the sandwich in his mouth, but I didn't let him. I stood up sharply and then slapped the food off his hands. He tried to grab me, but one of his followers stopped him. The serving women were looking right at our table, and they also had the right to call in the principal if they suspect anything remotely associated with bullying. He took a few steps backward and then walked away with his friends. My friends cheered me on for being brave enough to stand up to Max, who was one of the worst bullies in the school. It was only Jordan who didn't seem so thrilled. He told me that while it was nice that I was able to stand my ground with Max, it would have been better if I had just given him what he wanted. When I asked him why, he explained that Max was vindictive, and the little altercation in the cafeteria wasn't going to be the end of it. To be honest, the way Jordan said it was kind of scary, but in the end, I decided that he was blowing things out of proportion. But by the end of the week, I realized that he wasn't. At the end of the second period on that fateful Friday morning, I hurried out of class to get to the restroom. I really had to pee, and because of this, I didn't notice that I was being followed. As soon as I walked into a toilet stall, 2 guys walked in after me. They grabbed my neck and pushed my face inside the toilet. I tried to push back, but they weren't done with me. While one of the guys held my head in the toilet, the other guy sprayed my face with some kind of hose. I'm not sure because I couldn't turn around to look at him. I couldn't tell how long I was in the toilet for, but I was sure I was going to drown. It felt like I was being waterboarded. Then, as abruptly as it started, it ended. They let go and hurried out of the bathroom before I could rearrange myself. I knew it was Max and his guys. It had to be. But I couldn't do anything about it or report the incident to anyone because I didn't see their faces. During the lunch break, I told my friends what happened, and they were also at a loss for what to do. But then a solution came to my mind a few days later in the form of a note on the notice board. The hall monitor had a biking accident during the previous weekend, and he had to undergo surgery. He wasn't going to be able to come to school for the rest of the semester, and so a new hall monitor was needed. This was the best way to not only avoid bullying, but to also stop bullies from picking on the weaker students. The teachers respect and listen to the hall monitors, so the students won't want to get on their bad side. So I quickly applied for the position, and fortunately I was chosen for the job. In the few weeks following my installment as a hall monitor, I got Max and his guys in detention twice. The first time was when they were picking on a freshman in the hallway, a few minutes after the break was over, and I quickly reported them to the nearest teacher. The second time was when I saw them sneaking off the school campus. This time, they actually begged me not to tell anyone, but I felt like it was important to report delinquent students to the school authorities. Also, I was still very pissed about the toilet incident, so I wanted to get them in trouble as much as I could. They spent weeks in detention, and they couldn't get back at me. All was right in the world, but that did not last. Just a few weeks before exams began, Max and his friends walked up to me in the hallway, and he apologized for how he'd been acting toward me. He explained that nobody had ever stood up to him the way I did, which made him feel attacked. Thinking about it now, that apology sounded so lame, so fake. But then, I was naive enough to believe him. I accepted his apology, and he asked me if I was going to be at a house party that one of his friends was throwing. I'd heard about the party among my friends, but I didn't really think much about it. But when Max asked me, I said, yeah, sure, I was going to be there. By the end of the school day, I told my friends about the invitation, and Jordan, being the cynic of the group, told me that their motive for inviting me wasn't so pure. Even at the time, I knew that there was a very high chance that he was right, but I didn't care. I had never been invited to any party till that day. Sure, I was going to go. My friends, on the other hand, decided that it was better to be safe than sorry. That Friday night, I asked James to come to the party with me, but he declined, saying that he had to study. So I went to the party by myself. Worst mistake I could have made at the time. I'd never had alcohol before that day, so when Max offered me a drink, I was skeptical at first, but I eventually gave in after a while. I played a drinking game with some guys at the party, and that was all I could remember from that night. The next day, I woke up to a throbbing headache and some really disappointed parents. Till today, I still don't remember how I got home. After a long lecture about responsibility and whatnot, my parents decided to ground me, which was pretty fair, given the circumstances. I thought that was the end till I got to school the next week and found out that there was a video of me circulating around the school among the students. There was one of me dancing at the party with only my underwear, and the other one was of me puking my guts out in the bathroom. I was utterly shocked by the video. That was when it dawned on me that Max wasn't trying to be nice when he invited me to the party. He was looking for a way to completely humiliate me and make a joke out of me. And it worked. Everyone teased me and called me Barf Monitor for the next few days. Jordan and my friends consoled me and told me to let it go because the back and forth had gone on long enough. But I wasn't the type to back down from a fight. I decided that I was going to get my revenge as soon as possible, and I already knew how I was going to do it. You see, one of the perks of being the hall monitor was the fact that everyone, even the teachers and other staff, trusted and respected you. And because of that, I had access to certain things. I could get the key to the teacher's or principal's office from the janitor, no questions asked, and that was what I did. With just a few days to exams, I snuck into the chemistry teacher's office and got the answers to the examination. Then, I made a photocopy. Next, I snuck into the principal's office. He had a book in which the lock combination to every student's locker in the school was written. I used it to get the combination to Max's locker. Then I stashed the answers among some of his books. Then the next day, which was our chem exams day, I dropped an anonymous tip to the chemistry teacher, telling him that I saw Max sneaking around his office and clutching to a paper that looked like it contained answers. He confronted Max a few minutes before the exam was supposed to start, and as expected, Max denied it vehemently. The teacher then proposed a search of his locker, which Max agreed to do. He even opened the locker for him, only to be shocked by the realization that the answers were actually in his locker. He tried denying having anything to do with the answers in his locker, but nobody believed him. His parents were called, and after a long meeting in the principal's office, Max was suspended for the rest of the school year. Well, I guess this just goes to show why everybody does not want to get on bad with the hall monitor. I mean, I don't imagine too many hall monitors are going to go to the lengths that OP did here. But hey, when you've been utterly humiliated and you honestly have just about nothing to lose, at least it feels like you do, some people are definitely going to try their best to get their nuclear revenge. And honestly, considering this guy's a notorious bully, he probably deserves it. Our next story is, I really have bad luck with men. My ex Daniel hurt me worse than I ever have been hurt before, and I just had to get mine back. To understand just how horrible what Dan did to me was, I'm going to have to back up a bit. Like all the way back to my first boyfriend. See, I was something of a late bloomer. I really didn't do things when people my age did them. I had my first alcohol at the age of 23. I'm going to tell you now that Dan was responsible for this. I really didn't have a rebellious teen stage in my life, and even my first kiss came when I was 19 years old. For someone who just did about everything late, it wasn't particularly weird that my first boyfriend was when I was in college, right? Well, yeah, but I was still very conscious about it, like really conscious. Once in 10th grade, my friend made a joke about me being alone forever, and I thought about it for like a month. Apparently, guys saw me as too serious and not fun, as one guy said. While it was true that I was pretty focused on my academics, I was pretty fun too, once you get the chance to really get to know me. Unfortunately, the guys in my class weren't interested in getting to know me. I was so scared of being alone, it actually kept me up at night sometimes. I started trying to make myself appealing just so I could get someone, anyone, to notice me. Now, I'm not exactly the most self-confident person, but I'm not unattractive, and I know this. So as some time continued to pass with very little interest from boys, I started to get a little desperate, too. Me trying to put myself out there and openly flirt with guys didn't really help me get a boyfriend at all. I either creeped them out or sent the wrong signal and got approached by creeps. Eventually, I just gave up on the whole struggle and accepted that it was going to take some time before I found someone who wanted me. In my freshman year of college, I met that person, or at least so it seemed. His name was Barry Allen. I know that sounds very similar to the name of a particular speedster. Barry and I met at a party. I had gone after my roommate had told me that if I stayed in any longer, I'd turn into a ghoul. It was Barry who walked up to me first. Of course, I was flattered that someone was talking to me, but I really didn't put much thought into it working out. I was there as the designated sober friend whose main mission was to prevent my roommate from doing anything stupid. But I still took the time to talk to Barry. Honestly, it was fun. By the time my roommate and I left the party, he had my number, and he already texted me by the time we got back to the dorm. My relationship with Barry was really intense. I guess I was trying to make up for all the experiences with a significant other I'd missed this entire time. So I guess we moved a little too fast. Barry didn't seem to mind though, and we had a ton of good times together. I even started to cut classes just to be with him. The first month or so was absolutely beautiful. I thought Barry was everything I wanted, and I was basically ready to marry him. And then the red flags started to show up. At first, it was the fact that he was always going somewhere and never really seemed to have a good explanation to where he was going and what he was going to do. At first, I tried to convince myself that I was just being paranoid and he had a life outside of being with me, but then I saw him on a date with another woman. I didn't hear about it. I didn't receive photos from a friend who also happened to be in the same restaurant. I saw it with my own eyes. Of course, I made a scene. I actually may still be banned from that restaurant, and I stormed out with tears running down my cheeks and my heart in shatters. For days he apologized and basically stalked me trying to get me back, and somehow it worked. I got back with him. I was still hurt though, and I was more cautious of him after that. Funnily enough, he did seem to change. In fact, if anything, he seemed to be overcompensating for his past indiscretion. He was always at my dorm and he was always very sweet, randomly bringing me gifts, flowers, and candy. I started to loosen up again and trust him. Then it happened. One day, I had to leave class early because I had a tummy ache, and I walked in on Barry making out with my roommate. To say that I was shocked would be an understatement. For weeks, I was depressed and an absolute mess. The rest of the semester was a blur, and I don't remember much of it at all. It wasn't until I got home that I had time to properly process what had happened and get over it. At least, as best as you can get over something like that. Barry scared me, and I was completely uninterested in another guy after that. That was until after a year, when I met Daniel Price. The fateful day I met Dan, I was having lunch on a bench. The moment I saw Dan approaching me, I resolved that I would reject him in the bluntest way possible, like I had a handful of guys that had tried to talk to me after Barry. However, there was one thing that I did not anticipate: Dan's smile. When he smiled, the words in my mouth got all jumbled up and all I could really do was stare. He had told me that he noticed me on campus a few times, but hadn't really had the guts to talk to me till then. He sat down beside me and also pulled out his lunch. For the next 15 minutes, we did nothing but eat. Perhaps it was because of how subtle he was, or perhaps it was his annoyingly enchanting smile, but when he started to talk to me and ask questions, I responded. I hated the fact that I was already starting to like him, but it also felt really good. Soon it was time to get back to class, so I told him I had to go. When he asked for my number, I told him to hope he saw me on campus again, and I left. I instantly regretted not giving him my number, and I almost ran back to give him. I almost. However, I was still very hurt about what had happened between Barry and I, and the last thing I wanted was to get hurt again. With any luck, I would never see Dan again, and I would go the rest of my life living happily. That was what I said to myself, but then the next day I went back to the same bench to eat lunch again. He didn't show up, but I wasn't deterred. I was prepared to have lunch on that bench for as long as it took till I got to see Dan again. On the fourth day, he showed up. I told him I was starting to think he would never show up again. He laughed and said he'd been looking for me in other places. That day, I got to learn a lot more about Dan. He played basketball for the university and was quite a good point guard, apparently. I had never really been a fan of basketball, but I'd already started making a mental note to do research on the school's basketball team. He liked classical music and spent almost half an hour talking about some of his favorite pieces and composers. That day, I did give him my number, and the next 2 years of my life was sealed. My relationship with Dan was almost the complete opposite of my relationship with Barry. We moved very slow. Dan was really sweet, but then again, Barry was sweet, so I was still a bit skeptical. I kept looking for red flags and trying to find excuses to end the relationship early before I got my heart hurt again. Milestones in our relationship took so long. In fact, we'd been seeing each other for almost 6 months before I accepted to officially be Dan's girlfriend. Up till that point, I just kept telling everyone we were seeing where it was going. The way I saw it, the less invested I was in everything, the less it would hurt if it all went south. However, eventually, over months, I started to heal and I started to trust Dan more. When we graduated, we moved in together and started our respective careers. He didn't go pro with basketball. It took a little while longer for me to get a job though, so for a few months, I was almost completely reliant on Dan. During that time, I got to become even more trusting of Dan and basically let my walls down. When I started to work too, we settled into a routine where work took up most of our time. But he was still a great boyfriend and he was still available, or at least so it seemed. So what changed? Well, one day I started to feel a little suspicious. It wasn't that I wasn't enjoying the time we spent together. The main issue was that Dan seemed too perfect. I know you're probably thinking about just how weird that sounds, but really, I'd been in a relationship with Dan for about 2 years, and yet I didn't feel like I didn't know enough about him. It seemed like he was showing me the kind of person he wanted to be around me instead of who he really was. It was the little things too. For example, he told me very little about his family and his childhood. There was also the fact that he never told me about his friends, and when I asked, he always just said they were unimportant, or that he really didn't hang out with them much. It seemed like our relationship was getting more serious by the second. So why had I still never met any of his friends? It just didn't seem right with me. He just had to be hiding something. Perhaps a second secret life? I'd read about men who had entire second families and who had somehow seemed available for both their families and were seemingly perfect husbands and fathers. Perhaps Dan was someone like that too. I didn't know. So I did what every suspicious girlfriend did. I went snooping. For months, I secretly searched his documents and files to see if I could find anything on him. I even did searches at the DMV and the US prison records. Nothing. So I went to the one place I knew I could always find info, his phone. Now, I've always maintained that privacy is important, and I had never gone through Dan's phone up until that point, but I just needed to know what was up with him. So while he slept one night, I picked his phone up and went digging. I went straight to his messages, and boy, was it a minefield. The first thing I saw was a group chat called The Boys, and you wouldn't believe who was in the group. Barry. That's right, my ex-boyfriend was seemingly best pals with my new boyfriend, and I had no idea. That doesn't seem so bad though, right? Well, true, but when I went through their chat, I was horrified. Apparently, Dan had started dating me as a dare by Barry. Barry had claimed that I was damaged goods, and Dan had said that he could get me anyways. So the last almost 2 years of my life, I'd been with someone who only saw me as a conquest. What was worse? Dan was planning to break up with me on our 2-year anniversary. The boys joked about it, and Barry even asked for a video. Pain, sorrow, heartache, and anger welled up inside me. Just when I started to think I could trust someone again, this happens. Absolutely shattered as I was, I decided that this wouldn't break me completely, so I carried on dating Dan, but I also started to scheme. Now, Dan liked to send me inappropriate photos when I was out alone or with friends to motivate me to come home, so I compiled a few of them, and 3 days to our anniversary, I sent them and a ton of inappropriate messages to his female boss from his phone. Then, I picked the bag I'd prepared up and left the apartment forever. Simple as my plan was, it worked really well. He not only got fired from his job, somehow no one wanted to believe that his girlfriend had been the one to send the photos, but he also got slapped with a sexual harassment lawsuit as well. I got my friends to get my things from the apartment, and I didn't see him for a long while, though I got info about him from the gossip mill. Eventually, I decided that I had to make sure I finished what I started, and I contacted the prosecuting attorney to testify against him. As I told the court how I had no idea what kind of sicko Dan was and how I'd broken up with him as soon as I'd heard what he had done, I looked into his eyes and saw the face of a defeated man. It was then that I knew I had won. On the way out of the courtroom, I walked up to him and whispered, "Nice bet you had, baby." I haven't heard from Dan since then. I also would probably never be able to trust another man again, but at the very least, I had my vengeance on Dan for toying with my heart, and my only regret is that I couldn't get Barry too. But who knows? Maybe I just might soon. The only reason why I can't really blame OP for what they did here is imagine having 2 years of your life taken up and finding out it was all a lie the whole time. I feel like just about anybody would have a crazy reaction to finding out they wasted 2 years of their lives over a total scumbag and having your trust completely ruined again. I ruined my ex-boss's marriage and life. I ruined my ex-boss's marriage. Today, he's divorced, jobless, and miserable, and I hear his wife is currently engaged to a business mogul. You know, now that I think about it, I wouldn't say I ruined it, he did. This happened 2 years ago at my current job, so it's quite recent. It started some years back when I was accepted to intern at an advertising firm. I'd always wanted to work in advertising, and when my friend sent a graphic flyer to my email, I was very excited about it. I knew I would be selected. I was doing very well in college and was almost done. My grades were good. I had the needed qualifications and creativity, and I knew just how to sell myself to the human resource team because that was what any great advertiser must know how to do, to sell stuff. When I went in for the second stage of the interview, the physical interview, the person who I found out later was the head of human resources was very impressed with my outfit. "Something about your outfit is unique and beautiful. Can you tell me why you chose to wear this?" he asked me. I replied to his question, and as I'd been taught, told a short story while at it. He smiled, and that was when I knew that he was impressed with me. After the interview, one of the interviewers stood and clapped. I was so excited. That is easily one of the highlights of my career till this date. I knew that they would like me, but I didn't expect them to be that impressed with me. I thanked them, and they of course asked me to look forward to their response. For a full week, I waited for an email from them. I was very frustrated at some point because it just was not coming, and I wasn't sure about sending them a reminder. On a Friday afternoon, I checked my computer and saw that I'd been offered a spot as an intern. I was happy, not just because I was going to be learning the ropes of my dream job, but because it was a paid internship and it paid well. My mom was very happy for me. The morning of my first day at work, she sent flowers to the apartment I shared with my friends, some chocolate, and homemade cookies for my coworkers. My mom believed it was important to make a good, strong first impression, and what was a better way to make a strong impression than to have my new coworkers enjoy my mom's nicely baked cookies. I resumed work very happily. I was even happier to meet my coworkers. The team I was in was a team of 7, including the team leader. There were 2 interns, myself included, 3 permanent staff, the assistant team leader, and the team leader. I offered them my cookies and they took them and thanked me. The work environment looked good and they weren't all dressed in conventional office clothing. It was just the right environment for me. They also seemed like nice people. Everything was going great until it was not. The assistant team leader took an interest in me. He would help me through my tasks, encourage me to ask him questions, always offered to help, and sometimes would even buy me lunch. I was grateful for his help. I even told my friends and roommates about it. One of my friends was skeptical though. "I think it's strange that he's buying you lunch though. I just don't trust that he has no other motives." I rolled my eyes at her. It wasn't unusual for my friend to be that skeptical. Perhaps if my other friend had said that, I'd have considered it, but this friend was too jaded with life and uninterested in seeing the positive sides to anything. So I just dismissed her concerns. He's just being a kind person. Plus, if he has other motives, then it's probably to make me give him a good review so he can be the next team leader. I heard that the team leader may be leaving soon. She shrugged. Maybe just stop accepting gifts from him. You don't want him to wake up someday and accuse you of leading you on, she warned. My other friend was irritated by my pessimistic friend. How are we friends with this person, she asked. Look, yes. Sometimes people do stuff with hopes that they'd get something out of it, but he may just be trying to be nice. How about we just appreciate his good deeds and give him the benefit of the doubt, she said. Well, we can't say that he has bad intentions until he actually does something, I added. My pessimistic friend shrugged and ignored us. Just the week after that conversation happened, the assistant team leader showed that he was being nice for a reason. It was after close, and I decided to stay back and finish a copywriting task my team leader assigned to me. I could have finished it at home, I wish I did, but my friend who was studying to be a clinical psychologist at the time had told us that the best way to make your home more relaxing was to keep work at work. I was at my desk working at the computer when I felt some hair on my neck. I had short hair at the time, so my neck was bare. I turned back in fear and saw my boss. He was standing so close to me that the hairs that touched my neck were his beard. I have a feeling that he was getting a whiff of my perfume when his beard touched me. He stood so close that when I turned around, our faces almost touched. I was alarmed. He smiled at me, but it wasn't the usual smile I'd seen him wearing. It was a mischievous grin. "Why are you still here?" he asked me. "I had a task to finish," I replied, hoping he would take 5 steps back. I was too shocked to do anything, to tell him to move back a bit, and to this day I feel bad about not telling him off. Before I could turn back to continue working, he pulled me by the neck and pressed his lips on mine. I was terrified. I quickly pushed him away and spat out. He smiled again, the mischievous smile. Come on, are you teasing me? What was that? I asked angrily. His countenance changed. He looked confused. I thought you were feeling it too. I thought you liked me, he said in an accusatory tone. In that short time, I combed my brain to know exactly what way I'd behaved myself that would make him think that I liked him. I don't. Jeez, you're my boss, and did you not just get engaged? I asked. He looked embarrassed and apologized profusely. He swore that he thought we had an understanding, that I liked him just as he liked me. I'm sorry I misunderstood you. This will never happen again, he assured me. I was so naive at the time that I apologized for leading him on. He made me promise not to tell anyone, and I agreed immediately. Why would I want to tell anyone about that embarrassing incident anyway? I told my friends though, but when I did, both my pessimistic friend and the other one were convinced that he was up to no good. Even if he did think that something was going on, like a spark of sorts, he could have asked you if you were feeling him too and not just tried to kiss you. That is strange, the other one said. Why is he even trying to have a spark of any kind? He's your boss and you're just an intern at work. Shouldn't interns be a sort of romantic no-go area? I was confused, but since my boss had apologized and promised that it would never repeat itself, I didn't bother too much about it, nor did I try to tell anyone, not even my team leader at the time, who was a very understanding middle-aged woman. I wish I did though. Perhaps if I'd reported him to someone, he wouldn't have been able to cause me a setback as he did. When I resumed work after that weekend, I noticed that my boss was unusually cold toward me. He didn't greet me with a smile as usual or speak to me at all. I took it that he was simply too embarrassed about what had happened and simply went about my day. That week, I noticed that he would try to pick on me at meetings. He gave me heavier tasks and tighter deadlines too. I had to ask him what was going on. When I did, he looked at me like I had unicorn horns on my head. "What are you talking about?" he asked me. "It just feels like you're punishing me," I told him. He said, "Listen, this is a workplace. If you're not ready to work, you may as well quit. You don't expect me to treat you specially from the other intern because I had feelings for you, do you?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out of it. "Oh, well, I'm sorry. I asked you out and you declined, and I respect that. I would rather not visit the topic again." "How cunning," my friend exclaimed when I told her. "Honey, you have a manipulative, terrible person on your hands." I sighed. I knew I did at that point. There was just something cold and calculative about his eyes when he spoke. The next Monday, my team leader invited us to her office for a brief meeting. "I'm worried about you," she said to me before bringing the meeting to a close. "When you first resumed work here, you were quite productive, but you slept on your tasks last week and didn't even finish the one assigned to you on Thursday." She paused. "What's going on?" The assistant team leader chuckled. "Perhaps she's become too comfortable here and doesn't think she has to impress anyone." He said it casually as though it was a joke, but a serious one. The team leader was not humored though. "I hope that's not what this is," my team leader said sternly. "I'm afraid you have to impress us if you intend to keep a job here, or even get a good recommendation." I was hurt by what she said, but I thanked her and she dismissed the meeting. As we went out of her office, I noticed a smirk on his face. It was deliberate. He was out to sabotage me. All through that week, my tasks were deeply scrutinized, and he complained about the littlest thing. I was frustrated, and it started to affect my behavior at work. I walked around on eggshells and was not as productive at work. The other intern in the team and I were talking one day when she admitted to me that she and the assistant team leader had hooked up in the office bathroom one evening. That made me realize that it was not that he liked me, he was just a sick pervert. One day, one of the staff was carrying a file to HR, but the team leader needed her, so she asked me to help. On my way to Human Resources, I took a look at the file and saw that intern review was boldly written on it. I decided to take a look at it. I snuck into the bathroom and read the reviews about me. Every member of the team had to write something. The assistant team leader, of course, gave a terrible review. It wasn't just that he gave a terrible review, he also worded it in such a crafty way. He was very selective with words to use to ensure that I was not retained at the firm. I braced myself and went to HR to drop the files. A week later, I was not retained by the firm, but the other intern was. The head of HR invited me to his office and offered me another internship spot in a different team. He said he believed that I could be useful to the firm, but maybe in a different team. I was hurt. The team I was in was where I fitted in the most, but it was either that or I left the firm totally. So I took another 8 months of internship. While that was going on, the assistant team leader got married. The team leader left and he became the new team leader. I was miserable, but I planned just how to get back at him. I got his home phone number from one of the ladies on the team I was in. She innocently gave it to me when I told her that I was going to have a cake delivered to his home for his wife's birthday party. I called his house that day and his wife picked up the phone. I said nothing and hung up. I did this for some days, but one day, when I called again, she asked, "Who are you?" I answered and introduced myself to her as her husband's coworker. I told her all that her husband had done. Surprisingly, she just said, "Okay, thank you," and hung up. At the time, the firm was on fire for a controversial advert they'd made for a brand. The press had a lot to say, and many clients were contemplating dropping the firm as their advertising agency due to the negative pressure from different quarters. I sent an email to an investigative journalist telling them about what my former boss had done. The journalist published it alongside an article about the controversial post, keeping me anonymous. The firm had to fire him. They couldn't help it even if they wanted to. They had to throw him out after their private investigation showed that he had made a habit of wooing naive junior staff and ghosting them later on. Some other interns who were not retained in the firm sent emails to the journalists telling them about their experiences with him. His wife refused to comment on the matter, and she replied with divorce papers. My former boss went from being a team leader in a top advertising firm to being jobless and separated from his wife, who had caught him cheating in the past and was tired of his constant infidelity. Not only did I get revenge, but I also helped many other girls get justice too. I've since requested HR to return to the team I was in, and it was approved. I've also been retained by the firm, and I look forward to being a team leader myself someday. I definitely think it's very brave what OP did here. For you to have to experience that and still be working in that company, praying that you don't get fired so you don't stunt your career growth. For you to go and share your story to a journalist for the intention of publishing it, whether you're anonymous or not, that's a big step, but it proved helpful for a lot of people. Our next story is, sister broke my new MacBook, so I put snakes in her bubble bath. The story I'm about to share happened a few weeks ago. Until now, I don't think a better revenge fantasy has ever been carried out. I mean, snakes in a bathtub? It's something I've always been thinking about because I'm a writer, and it's something I've always been trying to implement into one of my stories. I know talking about it like this might sound somewhat psychotic, but it's not, I assure you. All I'm saying is that I had a good plan, and I carried it out to perfection. And while I'm still grounded because of it, I'd say it brought the desired result, so a win is a win. Till today, I still don't know why my older sister Bree picks on me. Seriously, I have nothing that she would want. She's the more beautiful daughter, she has tons of friends, she's the assistant captain of the Glee Club, and her boyfriend looks like the younger version of Channing Tatum. The only thing I have going for me is my books and poems, which everybody else thinks are too dark. Anyways, for some reason, Bree doesn't like me, and instead of leaving me alone like most other people, she decided that it wasn't enough, and she kicked her bullying up a notch by breaking my new MacBook. Well, I retaliated, and it was good. But let's start with how I got the new laptop. A few months before Christmas, I decided to take my writing more seriously. Before that time, I'd only been writing poems and short stories for my amusement. But when I started my freshman year of high school, I started hanging out with a new circle of friends. We were talking about a literature assignment one time during lunch break, and they were all complaining that it was impossible to come up with a 7-line poem before the next class. I told them that it was pretty easy, which they didn't believe. After a round of argument, my friend Max decided to settle it with a bet. I was to make a poem with any topic of their choice, and if I could, I won. So I agreed. They gave me a title. I really can't remember now because it was so long ago, but it sounded like a 90s movie title, and to their utmost surprise, I wrote them a poem and won the bet. Max was really surprised with how good I was with literature, and before the lunch break ended, she made me write another poem with the title, Love and All That's Lost. During our walk back to class, I explained that fiction and literature creativity came easy to me, and I've written a bunch of stories. They had to beg till the end of the school day before I agreed to bring my drafts the next day. When I did, they were blown away by my work. They told me how amazing it was and how I was like a younger Shakespeare. I'm not the kind of person that allows compliments and flattery to get to her head, but that was the first real compliment I've ever gotten. My friends in middle school think literature is dumb, and I was dumb for liking it. My parents think I use vile words and that I should tune it down a bit. And my sister? Well, she didn't care much for literature. But instead of saying that or not saying anything at all, she decided to tease me about it and call me a dumb geek. Anyways, I thanked my friends, and while we were having lunch, Sophie asked me if I'd published any books on Amazon, or if I was working on any. I said no and explained that I only wrote when I was bored. And besides, I didn't think people will get my writing style. She told me to give it a try and see how it was going to go. After a moment, I said okay. I wasn't really planning to do anything at the time because the writing was hard and I was just settling into high school. And I had lots of schoolwork to do. At least that was what I told myself. In truth, I was only making excuses because, at the time, I was sure that my friends were only complimenting me to make me feel good about myself. I wasn't about to test that theory with a bunch of strangers online. A few weeks went by, and then a few more, and one day Sophie asked me out of the blue if I'd written anything new. I told her that I was still working on it. I expected it to end there, but it didn't. She asked me if she could see the draft I was working on and had no choice but to tell her that I hadn't started. They both asked me why, and I wanted to blame it on school and how much work I had to do, but instead I told them the truth. I wasn't sure that I was that good a writer, and I didn't want to find out from internet trolls. They both nodded their understanding, and after a while they suggested that I try Wattpad with one of my old drafts, just to see what people thought. I said sure. That same day I created an account and uploaded my first story. A few weeks went by, and I actually had a lot of reads and likes. It was very encouraging to see that other people, aside from my friends, liked my work. That day, I promised my friends that I was going to start working on something serious. Before that day, I didn't have a laptop. All I had was my phone, and I knew that if I was going to be serious about writing, I needed to get one. On my way home, while Max and Sophie were rambling on and on about who liked who, which jock they thought was hot, the only thing I had in mind was how I was going to tell my parents to get me a laptop. Bree had a laptop, but I was sure that there was no way in heck that she was going to let me borrow it. So when I got home, I waited till dinner to tell them about my request. Before I did, I made sure to laugh at my dad's jokes and compliment my mom's new hairstyle. Eventually, I popped the question, and they instantly replied with a question of their own. What for? I had to explain how I love writing and why I thought it was something worth exploring, and I couldn't do it without a laptop. Bree snickered and laughed all through as I explained, but I paid her no heed. Eventually, they looked at themselves and probably telepathically talked to themselves for a second. Then they looked back at me and turned me down. They said that I was doing well in school and writing was just going to be a distraction. That was absurd. I wasn't just doing well in school, I was one of the top tier students in my class, and the writing was just going to help me get even better. I made my argument, and they told me that they didn't have enough money to buy me a laptop at the time. I got so pissed, and I accused them of not supporting my writing, then stormed off to my room. I decided that night that I wasn't going to rely on them. If I wanted something, I had to get it myself. So that next weekend, I went around my neighborhood and told people that I was starting a new dog walking business. I was going to help them walk their dogs 2 times a week. I got some new customers immediately because I was charging below the normal rate, and I started the business. While it was kind of tough from the onset because I didn't have a dog and I didn't know how to walk them, but I learned on the job. Another few weeks went by and I calculated all the money I'd made dog walking. It wasn't enough for the MacBook I wanted to buy. My friends added some of their money, but still it wasn't enough. It was December already, and because of the holidays, I wasn't getting dog walking gigs anymore. I had totally given up on the laptop, when on Christmas morning, my parents woke me up to check out my presents. I wasn't really feeling like it, but after a few minutes of nudging, I decided to go downstairs with them. They handed me my gift, and I started to unwrap it. My sleepy eyes blinked open when I saw the Apple logo, and I could not contain my surprise. My mouth fell off its hinges, and I looked at my gift and then back to them. They apologized for not taking me seriously the first time, and because of how hard they saw me work, they decided to get me the laptop. I thanked them and immediately went to set it up. A few moments after I'd uploaded all my drafts to the laptop, Bree barged into my room, eyeing my laptop with so much jealousy in her eyes. Apparently, she had asked our parents to get her the new iPhone 14, but they told her to get her grades up first. But seriously, I can't see any reason why she would want the new iPhone 14. She got the 13 Pro Max not more than a few months ago. After that day, Bree, who had always been hostile to me, decided to be even more hostile to me. She would bump into me on purpose and yell at me for not watching where I was going. She would tease me for being a wannabe Nora Roberts. It got so bad to the extent that I started to doubt the fact that she was truly my sister. But all this wasn't that bad compared to what she did next. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I'd just finished my first draft for the story I wanted to put up on Amazon, and I was planning to send it to Sophie for review after I was done editing all the typos. Out of the blue, Bree stormed into my room and showed me her phone. The screen was broken, and she accused me of breaking it. Before I could defend myself, she grabbed hold of my laptop and stormed out of the room. I told her to stop and that I had nothing to do with her phone screen breaking. She said that she didn't believe me, because in her words, I've had it out for her ever since I got a new MacBook. That didn't make sense at all, and I pointed it out to her. What reason could I possibly have to break her phone? It just didn't sound right. But Bree wasn't listening. She continued to yell and gesticulate wildly when my laptop slipped off of her hand over the balcony and into the living room. The floor was made with tile and not carpet, so it snapped into two on impact. I felt my heart break with the laptop as I watched some of the keys fly off the board. The only thing I could think of at that moment was, crap, did I save my work? I turned to Bree and without a thought, I lunged for her, trying to beat my anger out of her. The bout lasted for a few minutes till Mom and Dad came out of their room to separate us. They grounded us both for fighting, even though I explained to them that she smashed my laptop. They couldn't take action because Bree also accused me of breaking her phone. I knew in my heart that Bree broke her phone by herself, and she just used it as an excuse to break my laptop, but I couldn't prove it. The next Monday, I got to school and explained what happened to my friends. They both agreed that she was jealous about my new laptop, and that was why she did what she did. Sophie asked me how I was planning to get back to writing, and I told her that I was working on it. I still had some of the money I'd saved up for the laptop the year before, and if I do a couple more dog walks, I was going to be fine. After that was settled, Max asked me how I was going to get my revenge. Till that moment, I wasn't really thinking about it, but when she mentioned it, the concept started to get interesting. I told her I didn't know because I wasn't planning anything, but Max was the master of all things pranks. So she started to give me a list of options. Eventually, she said something about snakes. That was when I remembered a short story I wrote about someone finding snakes in her bathtub. Bree likes to take bubble baths on Saturday evenings, and Max's brother Ilian had a pet snake. It was perfect. We all decided that we were going to have a sleepover that weekend at my place, and when she was distracted, Sophie or Max will slip the snake into the bathtub, giving her the scare of her life. That Saturday evening, they arrived as planned. Max was kinda pissed off because she had to promise her brother her lunch money for the week just to take his snake out for the night. After dinner, we headed up to the room pretending to do some normal slumber party stuff. We left the door open to see when Bree was gonna walk past to the toilet. Eventually she did, and we jumped into action. We waited till she prepared the bath, then Sophie barged into the bathroom, asking her if she had a makeup set we could use. As expected, Bree said no and tried to send her away, but Sophie was adamant. She begged and pleaded till it became really annoying that Bree had no choice but to leave the bathroom to hand her a makeup set. That bought Max and me enough time to slip into the bathroom and dump the snake into the water. Bree walked back into the bathroom, and we stood just outside the door to hear what was going to happen. It took close to 3 minutes before Bree realized that there was something in the water. And when she did, she screamed at the top of her voice that it sent our parents running up the stairs and into the bathroom. There Bree was, sitting in a corner of the bathroom, knees curled to her stomach. She was shaking so violently that it became impossible for me not to laugh. We wanted to deny having anything to do with the incident in the first place, but the laughter gave us away. I was grounded for a month. I have no regrets though. Seeing the look on Bree's face made it all worth it. This is definitely a crazy level of revenge, especially if OP's sister had like a severe phobia of snakes. But I couldn't help but feel concerned for the pet snake throughout this whole situation. Are they even able to comfortably be in water? They're in a bubble bath, there's a bunch of chemicals there too. And also, like, what if Bree freaked out and was like thrashing around and smacked it and like crushed the snake or something? Was the snake okay? I need to know. Why I sprayed pepper spray in my ex-girlfriend's eye drops and sabotaged her singing career. Before you call me evil or whatever else, I need you to understand why I would do something like that. I met my girlfriend in college, we had the same major, and I remember meeting her for the first time, and my heart was captured by her. She wasn't the prettiest in the room, but she had a special kind of face, one that radiated a sort of joy, and I immediately wanted to be a part of whatever she had going on. The second time I saw her, she didn't look as happy and enthusiastic as she did the first time I saw her. I wondered what was going on with her. Maybe it was what my therapist now describes as a savior's complex, or maybe it was that I was in love with her already, but I wanted to know if something was wrong and if I could fix it. I walked up to her and told her my name. She regarded me for a while, nodded and extended her hand for a handshake. I took her hand. It was soft and almost limp, the kind of handshake that my boss at the TV station where I interned after high school would describe as weak and showing a lack of confidence. "Are you tired?" I asked her. Judging from her weak hands, she had to be tired. "I guess," she replied to me with a tired smile on her face. "But the day's only just begun," I said. She shrugged. "I was up all night." I suddenly felt my heart race. Did she have a boyfriend? Was she up all night with her man? Was she upset because of something her man had done to her the night before? "Can I ask what you were doing staying up all night?" She stared at me for a while. She didn't look angry that I'd asked if I could ask her such an intrusive question. Instead, she looked intrigued. She stopped staring, let out a long sigh, and made to leave. "I guess that's a no," I asked. She flashed me that tired smile again and walked away. After that encounter, I couldn't stop thinking about her. I felt bad for asking her that question. Perhaps it was too intrusive. The next time I saw her after that day, I walked up to her and tendered an apology. "Look, I'm sorry I asked you what you were doing all night. I didn't mean to offend you with my question. I was just curious." She raised her brows. "Really? I'm not going to lie to you. I was offended by your question. I mean, we don't even know each other like that." "I'm sorry," I apologized again. "I'm not that kind of person, I promise you. I'm a gentleman, a complete gentleman. It's just that the first time that I saw you, you looked so bubbly. Looked like you were excited to be here, but when I saw you that day, you looked so tired, gloomy, and unhappy, and I was just curious as to what happened. Then you mentioned that you hadn't been sleeping." "I didn't say that I hadn't been sleeping," she cut in. "I said that I didn't sleep the night before." "Okay, I'm sorry. I apologize again for asking that kind of question. Seeing as we hadn't established any kind of relationship, please forgive me." She smiled and then laughed. "I'm not mad at you. I was just kidding. I'm a singer and I was invited to sing at some program for freshmen. I'm still unknown around here, so I took it." I was surprised that she sang. She did have a sonorous voice, but I didn't think that she would be a singer. Maybe a writer, a good one, but a singer? Nah. I told her that and it had her in stitches. She said, "I know you're saying this because I wear glasses." She said, "Well, I write my songs, so I guess of course that makes me a writer." The more we spoke, the more I knew about her. She wasn't happy to be schooling. She hated her courses and was terrified of failing in school. She would have loved to have quit school and become a singer, but her parents would never forgive her for it. Being the savior that I thought I was, I offered her a solution. I would help her with her schoolwork so she could take time to pursue her career as a singer. It pleased her. We became very close friends, and when I asked her to be my girlfriend and she agreed, I was very happy. I pledged to only make life easier for her. I would look up auditions, singing openings, and stuff like that for her. I would sometimes even pay for her train or bus tickets. I also helped her with classwork and assignments. She never had to worry about lagging in class or any of those things, because I would always write out the important stuff and go through them with her. She soon moved in with me and life was good. Once I was hanging out with my sister, who was in her senior year in college at the time, and she warned me about my ex. "People are saying she's an opportunist," she said. "I just hope you're protecting yourself. A girl like that? You can't trust her." I felt offended. Even if people were saying that about my girlfriend, should she tell me about it? Was she trying to make me feel unworthy of my girlfriend? Or was she inferring that the only way a girl like my girlfriend would be with someone like me is to use me? I was mad at her and I told her how disappointed I was. One day, I was using my ex-girlfriend's computer for an assignment I needed to finish for her. When I was done with the assignment, I felt the need to look at other stuff on the computer. Before that day, I didn't think for a minute that I could ever see what I saw at the time. I did not imagine that my girlfriend could ever cheat on me. I wasn't looking to see if she was cheating. I was just curious as to what she was doing, who she was working with, and all that kind of stuff. There were times when I felt like I should know more about her. Even though we lived together, we were busy. I was busy with school and my student tutoring jobs, and she was busy trying to make something of her talent. I noticed a guy who looked vaguely familiar from his display picture that had been texting her. I eventually found out that he was quite famous, one of the singers in a band, but I didn't know at the time because I hardly listened to music. She was the closest I was to music. Curious about who the guy was, I clicked on the chat to see what was going on. It turned out that what was going on was that my ex-girlfriend had been exchanging inappropriate pictures of herself with that person. I was heartbroken. I couldn't believe my own eyes. I called my sister to tell her what had happened, but I felt too embarrassed to do that. My sister would have never have said, "I told you so," but still I didn't want to. I figured it had to mean something about me if my girlfriend was cheating on me. I took it so personally at the time. When my girlfriend returned, I confronted her with the truth, and she sobbed and apologized profusely. I wanted to break up with her, I swear. I badly wanted to end it, to say goodbye to what we had and just leave, but I just could not. I was madly in love with my ex-girlfriend. I'm going to admit that one of the reasons I didn't end it was that I didn't want to face people asking questions like, "What happened with you two?" I didn't want to have to deal with that, and everyone on campus knew that we were together. I also felt like somewhere at the back of their minds, they always wondered how I got a hot girl like my ex-girlfriend to date me. Telling anyone she was cheating on me would make them think, "Oh, that's what's going on." I was too embarrassed about the whole thing, so I kept the situation to myself and never told anyone about it. I forgave her, but I soon realized that I could not forgive or forget what she had done. Especially when after I told her that I'd forgiven her, she just moved on from it. I think I expected a sort of continuous sobriety. Whenever we argued, I struggled to not bring up what she had done. Aside from my struggle, we were fine. For a month, we were more intentional about spending time together. As usual, I did her assignments and made summary notes for her to study. Everything was okay until one day, I noticed that the guy who I'd seen exchanging photos with her was calling her on her mobile. I was pissed. "Why is he calling you?" I asked. She said, "I don't know. Perhaps he has something to say to me. I don't know." "I don't want you talking to him," I told her. "You can't make me not talk to him," she shot back. I sighed. "Well, considering that you cheated with this person, I don't think it's too much to ask if I don't want you speaking to him anymore." She said, "He's a big guy in the music industry. I need him, my music needs him, and my career needs him." I said, "Listen, if you're going to keep communicating with this person, then we may have to end this relationship." I knew, even at that point, that she probably did not care. "My career is more important to me than anyone and anything else," she replied coldly. I left the house and went to my friend's house. For 3 days, I slept on his couch. On the 4th day, she came over to my friends and apologized. I was too scared to ask her if her apology meant that she would finally let go of this guy. I didn't want to fight again. Yes, I was stupid, but I was also young and she was my first actual girlfriend. I never dated in high school because I was just never cool enough for the girls. Things were going okay with our relationship again, until one day when my sister's friend told my sister that she had gone to a high-end restaurant with her dad and saw my girlfriend kissing someone. The guy my girlfriend was exchanging inappropriate photos with sang at that restaurant with his band. After his performance, my girlfriend moved out from the crowd and they shared a kiss. My sister mentioned the name of the artist who kissed my girlfriend, but I didn't know who he was. It wasn't until she looked him up on the internet and showed me a picture of him that I realized that it was the guy who was exchanging photos with my girlfriend. When I asked my girlfriend about it, she apologized and added that she was just trying to suck up to him until she could stand on her own. It was at that point that it dawned on me that she was just a user. She wasn't just using the band guy, she was using me too. She had used me for my time, my brilliance, and even my money. I promised to get my revenge, and I did. I forgave her as usual. She probably thought I was stupidly in love with her. We hugged it out, and I pretended that everything was fine until it was time to strike. A group of top singers in the country was coming over to campus to conduct auditions for singers, and she'd been looking forward to it. The platform was a huge one, and her success in the audition would mean she gets to compete for a huge monetary prize and even acquire fans. She was a good singer, and there was a good chance that she would ace the auditions and enter the competition. So I planned to do something that would get in her way of getting there. My ex was talented, but she could not withstand pressure. She easily got discouraged and gave up after the tiniest inconvenience. The day before the audition, we went over her songs together. While she was in the bathroom that morning, I opened her eye drops in a small can of pepper spray that my sister had left in our house when she came to visit. I sprayed the eye drops with pepper spray. She uses her eye drops regularly, so I knew she would use them before leaving for the audition. I closed up the eye drops and left them on her table to watch her as she got dressed. When I saw that she was not using the eye drops, I reminded her to take her vitamins. She had some vitamin supplements she took to care for her eyes. She thanked me and walked up to the vanity while I smiled to myself. It was happening. To cut the long story short, she'd poured a drop of the sprayed eye drops into her left eye, and as soon as the liquid dropped in her eyes, she screamed. I pretended to care and drove her to the hospital after we tried rinsing her eyes with a generous amount of water. We were there all day while she yelled at and screamed at everybody. She cried about not being able to attend the audition. While she did all that, I looked for a place to dispose of the eye drops so that nothing would be traced to me. Her outbursts at the hospital were very characteristic of her. Whenever things didn't go in the direction she liked, she would throw a fit. I tolerated her outbursts all through our relationship and would probably have kept taking it if she had not cheated on me repeatedly. That evening, we went back home and I headed straight to the room and packed my stuff while she slept. I didn't even have the guts to break up with her. I just moved out when she went out the next day and never spoke to her again. Interestingly, she never reached out either. It was as though she was relieved to no longer have me around her. That hurt more than anything else, but I'll always take comfort in my revenge. I knew how much she doubted her abilities. Missing the audition would have been too much for her, especially since I wasn't there to remind her that she was a good singer. I never saw her sing again. That was enough for me. Have you guys ever had a relationship where you made mistakes like OP did over and over, like giving them too long of a leash, hoping that if you forgave or forgot something that it would somehow magically turn around and work? I feel like in some ways I can kind of relate, but definitely not to OP's degree. Also, what OP did here was pretty risky because, God forbid, you don't want to actually damage her eyes in any way. That said, our next story is, I hit my father where it hurt. More often than not, parents are seen as caring, compassionate, nurturing people. My father, however, was the complete opposite of that. My family was not a functional one to begin with, as my parents were never planning on getting married, and I just happened to be conceived because they both made the mistake of not using protection. My mother was a fervent Christian and insisted on keeping me. At first, my father was on board with the whole idea, but then the moment I was born, he seemed to instead do a whole 180 on the idea of keeping me and instead wanted absolutely nothing to do with me. My mom was upset when he decided that he would instead not provide for me or my mother in any way at all, but she was fine with that. It wasn't until her friend, who was a social worker, insisted she sued my dad to compel him to pay for child support that she decided to do that. As is typical in the US, she got the court to impose child support, and my dad had no option but to pay it or else he risked going to jail. However, he was never available in any other way but financially. He never showed up to the house, never took me out, never made it to a PTA meeting. As a toddler, I'd many times asked why I didn't have a father, and for a very long time, my mom had told me that I did, but he was just out of the country working. Why she would want to protect my dad's dignity, I do not understand. It certainly didn't help that I repeatedly got teased and bullied at school, and my bullies always made fun of the fact that my father wasn't available. My mom always said that it didn't matter and that I should try to ignore their insults, but honestly, I really couldn't. I got into a handful of fights and got suspended from school a handful of times. Through it all, my mom was quiet and calm. She disciplined, but with love, and never physically. Eventually, she did tell me the truth about my father. That was when I was 13. By that time, I had started to suspect that he was just a deadbeat. The overseas stuff was pretty easy to see through. With the true knowledge of who my father was and where he was, I tried to reconnect with him. It was disastrous. He not only refused to see me, his own son, but he went as far as to call the police on me, saying that he was being stalked by someone he did not know when I showed up to his house repeatedly. I decided to try a different approach. I got his email address online, I couldn't find his number, and sent dozens of emails asking to see him. I pleaded and begged and even went as far as saying that I didn't mind if he just watched me through a glass and didn't say a word. I never received a response. As days turned into weeks and weeks turned into months, the hopes of having my father in my life dwindled. And soon, I'd given up all hope of ever reconnecting with him. When I turned 14, things started to change for my mom and I in a massive way. My school had a play, and I was in it. I acted my heart out, and my hard work did not go unrecognized. Apparently, there had been a casting director at the play. She wasn't on the clock, though. She was just the mother of one of the students. Somehow, my acting had impressed her so much that she insisted on seeing my mom and I after the play. Turns out that she was a part of a movie project for one of America's big media houses, and there was a character that she thought I would be just perfect to play the role of. She asked that my mom bring me to the audition. My mom wasn't very sure about it, but when she'd seen the excitement on my face, she decided to go with it. I auditioned and I got the role. It was almost surreal, and I was very excited about it. It really wasn't easy balancing school and screening for the movie, but somehow I managed to pull it off. It helped that I had a ton of fun on set, and I got to meet some pretty amazing people too. I wasn't certain that the acting life was the one I wanted to be part of long term, but at the time it seemed pretty fun. When the movie premiered, it was an instant hit. It wasn't a big blockbuster, but it did pretty well. With the success of the movie, I got a fair amount of popularity too. Once my dad started to think that I was famous, the man who had spent almost 15 years of his life denying me decided that I was suddenly his son. What was worse about the thing was that I found this out on TV. Yep, my dad, who wanted nothing to do with my mother and I so much that he was willing to call the police on me, went on TV to give an interview about how I was his pride and joy, and he had always loved me. He claimed that he'd always wanted to be a part of my life, but my mom was still bitter about how the relationship ended, that she kept me from him intentionally. The whole thing was so absurd, I wanted to publicly shame him. Again though, my mother advised me against it. She claimed that silence was the best thing to give, and she was not willing to roll in the mud with the pigs, so I carried on with life like usual. My mom was a pretty good manager, and while she didn't want me to become a child actor, she took the advantage of my little fame to get me a few deals that paid relatively well without affecting my academics too much. To her, school was the most important asset to have, and she was not willing to risk it for anything in the world. I agreed with her and I continued to work on school. Ignoring my father did not work at all. He continued to give interview after interview, and soon Many fans were asking that I give a response. Some even went as far as saying that my mother was an awful woman for keeping me away from my dad. Eventually, I had to do something about it, so I secretly agreed to a talk show segment at one of the local TV stations one weekend. At the show, I confronted my father about abandoning my mother and I, and how he had avoided me even when I went looking for him. He gave a pretty lame excuse about how my mom had told me her side of the story and that he'd always wanted to be in my life, but she had said no. This was obviously a lie, but the audience was actually buying it. Frustrated about how easily he had started to gaslight, I simply got up and left. As I was leaving, my mom was at the parking lot. She had seen me on TV and had rushed over immediately. She was upset, but more at my dad than at me. When we got home, she made me promise never to try to see my father again without her. If I knew what was about to come next, perhaps I would have told her to promise to never leave me too. A month after the whole fiasco at the TV station, my mom came into my room looking extremely sad. I instantly knew that whatever news she was about to drop, it was going to be something major. I was right. She was dying. Stage 4 cancer. I broke down. Between sobs, I asked how long she had known, but she didn't answer. She promised that she would take care of me for as long as possible and try everything possible to get better. She wanted to let me know what was up and what the plans were. Plan A? Get treated and get better. Plan B? In the event that she couldn't get better, she had saved a lot, including most of my earnings, in the bank. It was enough to get me through college and be comfortable for a while. She had fully paid for the house, so I had no mortgage to worry about. She had instructed her older sister to act in trust concerning me until I had the legal capacity to make decisions myself. It was clear that she had put a lot of thought into this. Sad as I was about all that was happening, I was resolved to be supportive and help my mom through what could be the end of her life. I guess something in me switched. I knew how much cancer took from people. My friend Isabel's dad had cancer, and I saw just how much it affected her. Thankfully, he got better. With any luck, my mother would too. I took up more responsibility around the house, and I was at her oncologist's, a very kind and understanding woman who always got me gummy bears, at least once a week, without her knowledge of course, to get updates. As was expected, over the next few weeks, my mother started to become a shell of herself. Between experimental treatments and cancer, I watched her deteriorate. Most nights I cried myself to sleep, and I prayed to any and every deity to keep my mom alive. Eventually, she had to be moved to the hospital and admitted full-time for treatments. It was at this time that my father decided to pounce. He sued for custody, claiming that my mother was unable to adequately take care of me, and as my father, he was the most appropriate person to take care of me. My auntie, who lived in the next state, had to be forced to fight my father in court. It was extremely upsetting, capitalizing on my mother's ill health to try to get me. I wondered why he decided that now was the time he wanted me, and that question was answered very soon. One day, after he showed up to my school and said he wanted to speak with me, he started talking about how he was proud of me and he couldn't wait for me to start acting again with him as my manager. He said we'd make a lot of money and he'd give me as much freedom as possible. I could leave school and start acting full-time. In fact, there was a role he wanted me to audition for soon, if I wanted. I was repulsed by all he said. The fact that he didn't even talk about me or my mom's welfare. My mother was fighting for her life and he didn't even care about her. All he saw when he looked at me was a cash cow. Thank goodness I had the common sense to record everything he said. I figured the recording could help sway the case in my aunt's favor, but that didn't seem enough. I had to hit him in a way that he knew never to mess with me again. I needed to ensure that his plans were rubbished. One day, I called to tell him I was interested in his plans for my future. I would testify in court that I wanted to stay with him and all that. I also wanted to audition for the role he told me about, if he was fine with that. I could hear the excitement in his voice when he laughed and said that was fine by him. Later that day, he sent me a script with the lines I was to act out. He told me to make sure I was diligent with learning my lines and that he'd come pick me up in 2 days for the audition. He picked me up from my mom's house, I hadn't moved out yet, and took me to the studio. On the way, he talked non-stop about how he'd put everything on the line selling me to his friend who had told him about the audition. He said it was all riding on this. If I messed up, it would take forever before I saw a big chance like this. He was obviously lying about this, but I let him keep talking. When it was my turn to audition, I walked right up to the stage, looked my dad in the eye, and I gave the performance of a lifetime. Just perhaps not the kind of performance my dad was hoping for. I talked about how my father was a no-good deadbeat whose idea of gathering was profiteering off his son. By the time security came to escort me out, I'd made enough of a scene to know that I certainly did not get the part. My dad was gone by the time I got out. I had to hail a taxi back home. Phase 1 complete. Phase 2 was, of course, giving the recording of my father to the lawyer to make a point about my father being unfit to have custody of me. I can only imagine the look on his face when he heard it. Unfortunately, though, I never saw. What I do know is that the court ruled in favor of my aunt, and I moved in with her immediately. I didn't have to spend long with her though, as my mom started to respond positively to a new treatment the doctors were trying. And after a few surgeries and procedures, she was in remission. Soon, she was healthy enough to leave the hospital, and I moved back home. Her getting better made every ache and stress worth it. I had my mom back, and nothing and nobody was going to separate us again. I'd made sure of that with my life. My mom and I have lived together peacefully since then, and after the court case, I literally have never heard or seen my father again. And I quite honestly wouldn't have it any other way. So there it is, the story about how I hurt my deadbeat father. Every single person I've told this story to has agreed that I did what I had to, and they would have done the same if they were in my shoes. I hope you agree too. I think this is more than fair what OP did here. I'm glad that apparently they could use that evidence that OP recorded in whatever court or proceedings. And thankfully, when you're over a certain age, like I'm assuming OP was 15 or 16 here, courts do heavily take into consideration what the kid wants. Even if the entire TV audience doesn't believe you, the whole community doesn't believe you, if you tell the courts, hey, I really don't want anything to do with my father, they're probably going to heavily factor that. I sabotaged my best friend's chance at getting an investor for her business. A major lesson I took from this is to always trust my instincts. Always, and of course, never leave my man alone with my friend, ever. My best friend and I are still friends after what happened. I stayed friends with her because she may have done something terrible to me, but she's been good to me in other ways. I met my best friend at a weight loss camp organized by a church that was partnering with a group of dietitians and psychotherapists. I was overweight and tired of looking that way. It didn't help that my kid's sister was thin and hot. Our mom was too. She used to even be a model. My parents never made me feel bad about my weight. If anything, they encouraged me and tried to make up for whatever negative comments I got from strangers outside the home. My dad was very supportive. He always stood up for me and would almost bite off the heads of anyone who tried to make the slightest negative comment about me, even his family. My sister is a model and she knows her onions when it comes to fashion, so she would help me combine outfits to help me look awesome. I could never dress down and just throw a big shirt on because of my weight. My sister would never tolerate that. Even though she was younger, she was super supportive and had a fast mouth, so God helps anyone who tries to praise her while putting me down. My mom was also supportive, but I knew for a fact that she would have preferred it if I were slimmer. I could also tell that my sister was her favorite daughter. She would much rather be seen with my sister than me. She took my sister to events all the time. I guess she was just embarrassed to have a fat daughter since she was a slender, pretty woman. I told myself that I was tired of carrying all that weight around, and I decided to do something about it. It didn't even help that I'd gained access to the internet and was starting to read about all the diseases linked with obesity. My parents believed in God, but we never attended church. They just weren't church people. But we had a neighbor, an old nice lady, who invited us regularly to her church. Her church organized fun teenage programs all the time, so my sister and I often went for those programs with no objection from our parents. It was on one of those programs that the pastor announced that the church was sponsoring a weight loss camp. I took the flyer home to my parents, and they praised my willingness to go, and then went to the church office with me to make more inquiries. On the first day of camp, I was settling in when I saw my best friend. Her parents dropped her off with her brother, who was also overweight. I found out later that they were twins. I had friends in school, but my best friend was different because I could relate very well to her. She was just as big as I was, maybe a little bigger. She had a beautiful voice and seemed like a kind person. I found out that her mom owned a confectionery and she regularly stuffed down the snacks, sweets, and chocolates in her mom's store with her brother. It was one of those friendships where you meet someone and you just knew that you were going to be friends for a very long time. We talked about everything. When the 2-week camp was over, we went home, but we stayed in touch. Her family attended the church, so whenever I went to church, we would sneak out to the bathroom and talk. We started eating healthy together, and while we couldn't work out together, we would regularly share notes about our challenges with working out and other stuff. My best friend and I hardly ever talked about boys. Perhaps it was because we didn't even have any and it made sense. We weren't conventionally attractive, and we were at the age where everyone was shallow and kids would make fun of you for the silliest reasons, like asking the fat girl to prom. My best friend soon lost a lot of weight. It happened too fast and she fell ill. My mother and I visited her in the hospital, and she told me about her parents having issues because of how fat she and her brother were. She was losing a lot of weight to save her parents' marriage. I felt so bad for her that we cried together. Our moms walked in on us crying and they excused us. That was a defining moment for me, as I'm sure it was for her. I was certain that I wanted to be her best friend. As years passed, we both lost a healthy amount of weight and looked so much better. I got a boyfriend and went to college. She went to a culinary school outside the country, but we still kept in touch. We had other friends, but we knew we were each other's best friends. And we looked forward to renting an apartment together in the same city after we were done with school. My best friend was the first of the two of us to finish up with school. She moved to the city, got a job as a chef, and was earning well. I soon moved in with her too, and soon was working with the government. My boyfriend also lived in the city, so he visited our home often. My roommate was 25 at the time and had never had a boyfriend. She had never been in an exclusive relationship. I would talk to her about it, and she would assure me that it didn't bother her at all. I didn't think that she may have been lying or pretending about it. I just accepted what had happened. One day, I returned from work and was very tired. As usual, my roommate had prepared food for us to eat. She totally loved cooking outside where she worked because that way, she could have creative autonomy and would do whatever she wanted with food. She handed me a plate and I thanked her. "I don't know what I'd do without you," I said with a mouthful of salad. She sat next to me at the dining table and sighed. "I have something to tell you," she said, looking into my eyes. I frowned and said, "What is it?" She kept looking at me. I dropped my plate of the almost finished food. "Do I have food on my face?" She then confessed to me that she and my boyfriend had hooked up the night before. I was shocked. She and my boyfriend hardly even spoke to each other. He had come to visit the evening before, but I wasn't home. I had told him that I would be at home, but I had to hurry off to finish some work before the next day. I begged him to stay back at home and wait for me. "You should bond with my roommate anyway. You guys hardly speak," I told him. I didn't know that they both would do a different kind of bonding. My eyes glistened with tears. "Why? Were you trying to hurt me?" I soon started to cry. She cried too. No, I swear I wasn't." She then went on to tell me about the news she got from home. Her dad was finally leaving her mother, and her mother was devastated about it. She had called my best friend and begged her to plead with her father. Her mother was an emotional mess. I had always suspected that her dad would one day leave her mom. She was way too besotted with him, and he carried on with life as though she didn't exist. They hardly even had a marriage. My best friend said that she had been hurt by the news and thought sex would make it better. I forgave her, but I told her I needed space. I was going to move out, but she offered to move out instead. We eventually agreed that she would go away until we were okay again. As much as I hated my best friend for what she did, I felt bad for her. Not just about her parents, but even about her long-term singleness. I forgave her wholeheartedly and we kept being friends. My boyfriend and I broke up though because he could not forgive himself and could never look me in the eyes. It was a painful time for my best friend and me, but we found our way around it. A year later, I met someone else. His dad was quite wealthy and influential, and we hit it off. He came visiting one day, and my roommate prepared one of her nice dishes. He was impressed and told her she must let him take some away for his parents. She agreed, and his parents were just as impressed with the food too. His dad, being a businessman that he was, asked to see her. He made her an offer to invest in her dreams of owning a restaurant in the city. She came home that night shedding tears of joy. She had looked forward to it her entire life and was tired of working at the restaurant, where she followed very strict rules about the cooking process. She also wanted a restaurant where she could just cook, and others would eat and enjoy her food, and she could be generous with her portions. We were happy about the news, and she was already considering breaking her savings to hire a smart lawyer so she could get a good deal from the agreement. At that time, my best friend was seeing someone, a young man who was our age and was in law school at the time. He would come over many times, but we hardly ever spoke. At some point, I wondered if my best friend had instructed him to not speak to me. In any case, I didn't care. One day, my boyfriend told me that he thinks my best friend hates him. I laughed and told him that he was being ridiculous. I don't know, she looks at me weirdly sometimes. I said, maybe because you are weird. You live with your parents, I joked. I live in their guest house, and I'm being serious. I think she hates me. I said, don't be silly. It's all because of you that she would be starting a restaurant in months. I'm sure she's grateful to you for that. He shrugged. As I rode in the taxi back to our apartment, I thought about what my ex had said. My best friend had always been in the habit of being cold towards the guys I dated. Before I met my current boyfriend, I went on numerous dates, and on the few dates that my roommate had met, she had treated them coldly. I could not figure out the reason for this. My best friend was otherwise a nice person with a bubbly personality. My boyfriend and I broke up over a fundamental difference, but we stayed friends. His dad was still going to invest in my best friend's business, and the arrangement was still in the works. I met someone else and we started going out. He was smart and very funny. I really liked him, and I told my best friend this many times. As usual, she was cold toward him too, and they hardly ever spoke to each other. One day, my boyfriend called me to let me know he was at my house and was waiting for me. Due to what had happened in the house when I left my ex and my best friend to be alone together, I panicked. Could you wait in my room? I asked him. Sure, there's no place I'd rather be. I was sure that he was winking. I could picture him winking at me. I hurried up with work so I could go home and meet up with him. I soon finished work and returned home. It was awfully quiet in the house. I tiptoed around, and as I had feared, my boyfriend and my roommate were together making out in my room. I could not believe my eyes. I tiptoed back out and went back to the office to cry my eyes out. I just could not believe that my friend would do that to me again. She knew that I was crazy about him. It was then I understood her. She only pretended to not like my boyfriend to throw me off while she seduced them behind my back. To this day, my best friend does not know that I know she made out with him. I simply got back at her by bad-mouthing her to my ex, who at the time was still a very good friend. I told him that she'd been arrested for fraud in the past and made it a psychological topic. I wonder if these things are genetic, I lied to him. Her dad was investigated at some point in high school. I think it was for fraud too. I made up other stories about her being a dishonest person. Now that I think about it, I don't know if it was my imagination, but she was coming on to me at a time when we were together, my ex said. I smiled. Of course she was, I thought to myself. I was tempted to tell him about what she had done, but I decided not to. Especially since he may think I was just being vindictive with the fraud story. Naturally, he told his dad about her fraudulent behavior, and the deal was called off. He withdrew his interest in investing in her restaurant. My best friend was devastated. She cried for days. And somehow I suspected that she was also sad because I'd broken up with my ex and he'd cut her off too. I knew he'd cut her off because I'd heard her call someone repeatedly and complain loudly that he was deliberately snubbing her. The smart thing to do was move out of the apartment. If I couldn't trust her with any man I was with, then it made no sense to keep living with her. I moved out and got a place of my own. We stayed friends, but I never let her meet whomever I'm dating. She is still very unlucky with men to this day. Honestly, after everything she did to OP, I'm surprised OP still kept them around as a friend in the end. Even if you were lifelong friends with somebody, if they went and slept with your partners multiple times, do you think you have the capacity to still remain distant friends with that person? I don't know if I'd be able to. I'd probably cut them off. That said, our next story is, bully messed with my boyfriend, so I cut the brakes off his bike. All my life, people have always overlooked me because of how I look. My stature too, but mostly my face. I've been told a billion times that I have one of those church choir / country girl kinds of looks. And because of that, they immediately decide that I'm an angel and I can do no harm. Well, sometimes it comes as a disadvantage because people tend to hold me to a certain standard, and sometimes I can't do or say what I really mean. But the advantages seriously outweigh the disadvantages. For instance, I'm usually considered first amongst my peers for leadership positions in school because the teachers think I would be more responsible than the other kids. I rarely get punished for any wrongdoing because they always have an inclination towards leniency with me. And I also get the biggest serving of food during lunch. The lunch lady likes me. She says that I remind her of her daughter. Anyways, whoever said that you shouldn't judge a book by its cover is really smart. He really knows what he's talking about because I have to be the most misjudged person on earth. Sure, I can put on my mask of sweetness when I want to, but in truth, that's just the lower 10% of my personality. It's a part I channel when I'm trying to make a good impression on someone. The rest of the 90% is a part of me only known to best friends and family. That's the crazy troublemaker part, which I only let loose when I'm at home. One of the main perks to being me is the fact that I can do any crazy thing I want and get away with it simply by hiding in plain sight. This was how I got away with carrying out an insane revenge plan against a bully in school. The dude humiliated my boyfriend. So let's just say I taught him a lesson. For you to understand the whole story, I have to explain it from the beginning. My parents split up a few years back, and I chose to stay with my mom. My dad was an abusive jerk who was so good at it that he never had to lay a hand on her. They say to use your words, right? Well, he did that. Emotional manipulation and blackmail, gaslighting, those were just a few weapons in his arsenal. Anyways, after a few concerned friends and family talked to her, she left him and we moved to her sister's a few states away. I have to say, moving from the city to a sleepy suburban town in Oregon was not the smoothest of transitions. I was used to the fast-paced lifestyle of the city. Even the cramped-up apartments that sometimes smelled like wet socks and our hostile neighbors were missed. We moved during my sophomore year summer holiday, which was good because I didn't have to go through any awkward mid-session orientation. My aunt, we'll call her Lisa, had a daughter as well, which was nice because I didn't have siblings. So she was like the sister I never had. Her name is, well, let's call her May. She was a year older than me, but we were in the same class. When we got to their house, I was supposed to share the makeshift bedroom in the attic with my mom. But May and I hit it off so well that she invited me to share her room. When I settled in, we had lunch, and May announced that she would see some of her friends. We walked to a nearby park where they all met up to hang out. May introduced me to her friends Lola and Maddie. After a few minutes of talking to them, they fell in love with me. They invited me to a party in some senior's house, and I let May make the decision. She told them that we'll get back to them because we had to talk to our parents and stuff. On our way back home that evening, I could tell that she was really excited about the party. She wouldn't let up for 1 second about it. Eventually, I asked her why, and she explained that her all-time crush and love of her life was going to be there. He was a senior and the point guard for the basketball team. And in her words, he was extremely handsome. She needed to go to the party to get a chance to talk to him, but that wasn't possible. I asked her why, and she explained that she'd been banned from going anywhere ever since she got caught sneaking out through her window. I told her to leave it to me and I was going to try to convince her parents. She was pretty sure that I wouldn't be able to pull it off. That's why it shocked her so much when I did. She asked me what I told them and how I got them to let us go to a party, and I simply told her that it was a skill, and the only catch was that we were not allowed to drink. We went to the party the next day, and I got to meet more of her other friends. The first thing I noticed when I got to the party was that she had a lot of guy friends. Most of them were on the basketball team. I wasn't really comfortable with them because most of the jocks in my former school were jerks. A few moments later, I rose from my seat and excused myself. I got a drink in the kitchen, not booze as promised, just a Diet Coke from the fridge, and walked out the kitchen door. The house was big, probably the biggest in the street, and it had a swimming pool at the back. But there were way more people at the back than at the front, so I couldn't enjoy the pool experience. I turned around to walk back into the house and bumped into someone. It was a guy, and even though the lighting in the backyard wasn't very bright, I could see that he was really handsome. Tall with curly brown hair and glasses. He was definitely my type. I didn't even notice that when I bumped into him. He accidentally spilled his punch on my dress. I only turned to look at it when I felt the cold drink on my skin. He quickly apologized for his clumsiness and handed me his napkin for the stain on my dress. I thanked him and then introduced myself. He did the same. Jay was his name, and he was also a junior. We talked for a while, and surprisingly, we had a lot of things in common. I was so engrossed in the discussion that when I checked my phone, I had a few missed calls and texts from May. More importantly, we had less than 8 minutes before curfew. I hurried back into the house, forgetting to give him my number, and met up with May, who was beaming like a little girl that got an early Christmas gift. There was no way we could get home before violating our curfew, so one of her friends decided to give us a ride in his car. I later learned that he was the one throwing the party. Thankfully, we got home with a few minutes to spare. I wanted to tell May about Jay, but she wouldn't stop talking about Mike. And of course, the fact that he had asked her out on a date at the party. I was happy for her. And by the time we were done, the story of Jay never came up. We went back to school a few weeks later, and by this time, Mike and May were already an item. A few days into school, I was walking down the hallway toward my AP English class, and Jay walked out of a corner and bumped into me. We exchanged pleasantries and talked for a moment. The bell rang in the distance, and we had to part ways. But this time, I didn't forget to get his number. We texted for the whole day after school and even decided to hang out at a cinema that weekend. The next day, which was a Friday, May and I stepped out of the cafeteria after we were done with lunch. I think we were talking about the mall we were planning to go to after school when in the distance, I saw Jay and one of the guys on the basketball team. I wanted to wave at him, but I stopped when I noticed that they weren't having a friendly conversation. The jock, Bill, who was at the party and was a friend of May, grabbed Jay by the shirt and pushed him hard against the locker. I didn't want to see what would happen next. I hurried over to Bill and told him to leave him alone. I tried being aggressive, shoving him backward and trying to look intimidating, but I just ended up making him laugh because he thought I was being funny. Yeah, I should mention, looking intimidating wasn't one of my strong suits. That was the downside to having a face like mine. Most times, I usually end up looking stupid. He backed off anyways and walked away. I asked Jay if he was okay, but he didn't want to talk about it, so he just grabbed his books, which had fallen to the ground, and went to class. The next day, we had fun at the cinema, and during the walk home, I asked him what the issue with Bill was about. He explained that Bill was a bully in his math class who just liked to pick on him for no particular reason. It all started when Jay refused to give him the answers to a math homework. I told him to report the issue to the school authorities, but he said it was fine and that reporting him would only make things worse. When I knew that he wasn't going to do anything about the problem, I told May. Then she told her boyfriend Mike, who talked to Bill. And for a few weeks, all was right in the world. Jay and I started dating, and Mike and May were going strong in their relationship. Until one day after the exams of our first semester in junior year, Mike decided to throw a party at his house. Jay and I had plans to go see a movie that day, but we canceled that and decided to hang out with everyone else. As usual, most of the crowd was at the pool area, but Jay and I found a nice dark corner where we could just chill. Out of nowhere, Bill and some other guys in the team stormed our spot and grabbed Jay. I tried to get them to stop, but those guys were animals. They didn't listen. They pulled him to the poolside and pushed him into the water. People laughed, thinking it was just a light joke between friends, but I knew that Bill wasn't trying to be friendly. He wasn't going to stop messing with Jay, no matter the approach I take. I was so pissed off that I left the party after Mike loaned Jay some dry clothes. Mike talked to Bill again and told him outrightly to stop messing with Jay. And even though Bill said okay while trying to play it off as a joke, it wasn't enough for me. I decided that I was going to get him back, and when I do, he wasn't going to know what hit him. May and I spent the next few days at home. There wasn't much to do than help Aunt Lisa in a restaurant. My mom had gotten a job as a nurse in the local hospital and she wasn't around much. One afternoon, May rushed into the room and told me to come work my magic with her parents again. Mike had just texted her that the boys were planning to go to a biking trail and they invited us. As soon as I heard biking trail, the gears in my head started to spin. There were so many accidents that could happen on a biking trail. Maybe one of those said accidents could happen to one of those boys. A boy named Bill, for instance. I told our parents, and as usual, they agreed. The next day, I borrowed a small cutter from Uncle Marv's, that's May's dad, his toolbox, and we headed out to meet them. All I had to do was wait for an opening when Bill abandons the bike. That didn't happen for the first hour. The boys were really into BMX, and they rode and did stunts non-stop. I was already starting to get frustrated when Mike decided that they should take a break and grab something to eat from the car. Bill and some of the other guys went with him to get the snacks and stuff we'd bought on the way, while the other guys were busy talking and paying no attention to me. When May stood up to receive a call, I took my chance and snapped the brake wires off the front and back tire. All that was left for Bill was to ride the bike. He did that shortly after we finished snacking. Some of the boys found a new bike stunt video on YouTube and they wanted to recreate that. Bill swore that it was going to be very easy to do so he and the rest of the guys, apart from Mike, got on their bikes and tried doing it. I don't know how to explain how the stunt went or what it's called, but I can describe the end. It was painful. Bill pulled off the stunt all right, but in the end, he needed to use the brakes quickly to safely stop the bike. But that didn't happen. When the brakes didn't work, he was too surprised to think fast. And before he could do something, the front tire hit a small tree root in front of him. He flew off the bike and rolled multiple times down the slopey land. The craziest thing of it all was that he wasn't wearing any safety gear. He ended up breaking his wrist because he used it to break his fall. Then he sustained some injuries on his knee, biceps, and torso. He didn't hit his head though, so I guess that's a win for him. But he did have to get some stitches. And throughout the rest of the holiday, he had to stay at home to heal. But till today, as promised, he didn't know who cut the brakes on his bike. Now, I totally understand why you want revenge against somebody who is a relentless bully, and even when warned, doesn't take anything seriously and does not stop being a bully. But man, cutting their brake line, that's, kind of putting their life in danger. OP's very fortunate that it wasn't more serious. That said, our next story is how I hid my girlfriend's passport and sabotaged her chances of getting huge modeling jobs. I met my ex-girlfriend when I was still freestyling as a photographer. I was 23, young, wild, artistic, and hungry. I was in my senior year in college, and I genuinely believed that I could show the world a different perspective on life through my photos. I'd always loved taking pictures. Even as a child, I would play around with a tiny camera I got as a Christmas gift from my dad's sister, who, though I never met, never failed to send me Christmas gifts. If you're wondering how come I never met her, it's because she and my dad are estranged. She was mad at my dad for something he did and she cut him out of life. Somehow though, she decided that even though her brother was trash, his daughter had done her no harm, and so the gifts came in every year, signed in her name. My dad never raised an eyebrow. He just acted like his estranged sister didn't exist and ignored her gifts to me. Anyway, I tried to connect with her via the internet when I was a senior in high school, but that didn't end up well. I realized that there was a reason she and my dad were siblings, and they were both weirdos. I never got any gifts from her after that year, and quite frankly, I wasn't bothered. After the things she said to me, I would have sent those gifts back anyway. Back to my camera, I would take very nice pictures with it and have everyone in my family take a look, or maybe several looks, at the pictures. In high school, I was the gay girl with the camera. I took several pictures for our Yay book, a term my friends and I came up with to create our version of a fun yearbook. I would take pictures of couples kissing, friends hugging, smiling teachers, all sorts, just to capture the beautiful times we had in school. When I got into college and majored in public administration, I momentarily forgot about photography and focused on graduating with good grades and making my parents proud, since they were paying my tuition. Just when I was close to getting into my senior year in college, my girlfriend at the time, who was an athlete, bought me a very expensive camera as my birthday gift. That brought back photography for me. I took pictures of people on campus and would offer to print them out for them for a small fee. I was very good at capturing happy moments. As though the universe thought I was too happy and needed me to chill out, I soon found out that my athlete girlfriend had been cheating. I was beyond hurt. I've always suspected that having a significant other cheat on you could hurt you, but that event made me very sure that the effects of cheating on the one who was cheated on can be psychologically damaging. I was hurt, so I poured my anger, pain, and frustration into photography. I went from capturing beautiful moments to capturing very sad ones. Even when I saw couples looking happy, I would wonder if one of them was cheating and if one of them resented the other. I took more pictures of people in pensive moods in the sun when it was set. One day, I took a picture of a guy leaning against a tree in school, looking very tired and depressed. A local magazine editor saw the picture and was impressed. He needed me to get permission from the model in the picture so the magazine could use the image. I didn't know how to find the boy, of course, so I kept passing by the tree for days, hoping that one day I'd see him. One day, luck smiled on me and I saw him leaning against the tree again. This time he looked happier and was dressed in pink pants and a white sweatshirt. I walked up to him and we talked about the picture I'd previously taken of him. I found out from our conversation that he was a runway model. He agreed for me to use his photos, and I did. That was how I made my first significant amount of money from photography. A month after our first job together with the photographer had gone well, he called and asked if I was open to taking a job. A small lingerie designer had just launched her new lingerie line, and she needed a photographer. Unfortunately, the photographer she hired to do the job bailed on her at the last minute. It was nearly impossible to get a new one, and on such short notice too. So the guy suggested it to me and showed her the picture I took of him. I met my ex-girlfriend at this runway show. She was wearing a white two-piece with lipstick kisses printed in red all over it. She was hot, but I figured she was straight and just did my job. I was in the office of the show's organizer after the show to go over the photos and discuss editing. I didn't edit the photos, but they had a professional who did. The model walked in looking very tired. "I'm starving," I heard her whisper to him. He whispered something back. "What? I can't wait that long." She was still whispering, but loud enough for me to hear and know she was upset. "I'm sorry, I can't help you. Models are to pick up their checks by Friday." She walked away, cursing angrily under her breath. I understood what had happened immediately. Models go through a lot in the industry. The ones who weren't famous were paid peanuts, and even when they're underpaid, payment sometimes is delayed. Some big designers stubbornly refuse to pay models. They simply promise to give them more visibility. Models would struggle to get the spots still. I never understood why a business that could pay would rather pay with exposure or whatever else. You can afford to do it, so why not just do it? As she walked out of his office, I resisted the urge to run after her. "Immigrants," the man grunted, as though by saying that word he'd explained everything I needed to know about the situation. I looked away, trying to hide my irritation, and went on to talk about the pictures. The next time I saw the model who had gotten me on board, I asked him about the immigrant model. "Oh, her? She's a fireball, that one." I said that she didn't seem like a fireball yesterday. I felt bad for how she was treated. He shrugged and said, "Payment comes in exactly a week after the show. She knew that." "Maybe she needed the money," I said, with a shrug too. "Are you interested?" he asked, smiling coyly at me. I said, "Would that be a bad thing?" He said, "I once saw her making out with another model at an event. Well, not a makeout per se, they shared a kiss and I thought it was hot. Two hot girls kissing." I said, "Could you put in a word for me?" I interrupted his description. "I'll try," he promised, and we parted ways. The next time I saw him, he handed me a piece of paper with her name and number written on it. "Thank you, I owe you." "I'll remember that," he said, winking at me. For 2 days, I tried to call her, but I chickened out and didn't do it. On the third day, I decided I was going to do it. "I thought you wouldn't call," she said when I introduced myself. She must have sensed my shock because she quickly added, "I wasn't surprised when he told you you'd asked for my number." I recovered quickly from my shock, grateful that our conversation might just go well. I said, "You knew that I wanted your number?" She said, "Girl, you were checking me out. I saw that look. You wanted to talk to me. I'm actually surprised that you didn't ask me for my number." I said, "You seemed upset. I didn't want to bother you." She said, "Oh, but that's never stopped anyone." Our first date went well. She was funny, smart, and ambitious. We went on more dates afterwards, and she soon became a regular in my life. Every day I would look at her and not believe my luck. She was absolutely beautiful. She had the kind of beauty that would intimidate anyone. As graduation drew closer, I asked her about exclusivity, and we agreed to be exclusive with each other. For the first time, I told her about what had happened with my ex-girlfriend, and we talked about how cheating was an insensitive thing to do. I had planned to explore a different city after college, but she had to stay in the city for modeling gigs, so I stayed for her. My parents offered to pay my rent in a comfortable area, and since she lived with 2 others, I invited her to stay with me. I had to stop photography because the numbers and politics involved with being a photographer were messing with my love for photography. I got a job and was working 9 to 5, the kind of job that my parents would say was a proper job. I adored my girlfriend. It was obvious enough for anyone to see, but sometimes I would wonder if she was using me. She was always asking for small loans that she never paid back. I wasn't worried about that because I could afford to not get my loan back. I was also earning way more than her since she was still trying to climb up the ladder in her industry. I also figured that she would make a lot of money soon and we'd be able to afford to move her weight around the house. My mom visited us one day and she took me out for lunch. She was going to take the 2 of us, but my ex had to see a dietitian that her agency had employed to take care of them. "I don't trust her," my mom said as she ate. I said, "What? Who?" She said, "Your girlfriend. I don't trust her." I frowned and said, "Mom, I still think you're not comfortable with me being with girls." As I said that, I wondered if it were true. My parents had been supportive since I came out to them, but I sometimes got the feeling that my mom would have preferred it if I liked boys. "It's not about girls," my mom said, looking around suspiciously like someone was watching and listening closely, and emphasizing the word girls. "It's not girls, it's her." I said, "Mom, you know I respect and love you, but my girlfriend is great. We dated for a while before we were official." She said, "I don't know, honey. She just rubs me off the wrong way. I hope I'm wrong." I rolled my eyes and said, "I hope so too." My mom watched me and then said, "I really hope so. You are clearly crazy about that person." I smiled. My mom was right. I was in love with my girlfriend. I loved her more than she loved me, but that didn't matter to me. What mattered to me was that she loved me too. So what if one person loved the other more? I supposed it was common stuff with couples. Besides, my dad loved my mom more than she loved him. He treated her like he still couldn't believe that she agreed to marry him. My mom returned home and I did too. As soon as I got home though, what my mom had said came back to my mind. My mom was not one to speak out of turn. I hoped that she was wrong about her. Weeks after my mom's visit, my ex came up with some good news. A huge fashion show was coming up in Paris, and models were needed in huge numbers. My girlfriend and her model friend were convinced that things would work out for them if they traveled. They also didn't want their agency to get involved, so the agency wasn't sponsoring the trip. "This could be my chance to finally make something of myself," she said to me. "Babe," I cautioned, "you have made something of yourself." She said, "Well, I want to be more. You do everything around here. I want to be able to do more too." I went over and kissed her on the cheek. "You will," I assured her. That evening, she asked me to lend her more money. She needed to pay for her flight and get her passport sorted at the immigration office. I agreed and she was happy. I loved to see her happy, but something just didn't feel right after I sent the money to her. I felt very funny and things felt different, but I ignored it. That evening, I returned from the office and met my girlfriend and her model friend watching TV and eating fries. As they watched and ate, my ex regularly checked the food she was cooking in the kitchen. I joined her friend on the couch and we watched TV together. Dinner was ready, so we went to the kitchen together and ate. As we ate silently, I felt an awkwardness in the air, and I knew it. I just knew that my ex and her friend had hooked up. I imagined that as we ate, they were touching each other with their legs underneath the table. As if propelled by a spirit, I stood and walked to the kitchen counter where I deliberately knocked down a salt shaker and bent a bit to pick it up. I was right, their legs were touching. I had never snooped on her phone before because I wouldn't want her to do it to me. That night while she was asleep, I snooped and got all the proof I needed. Her friend was not just a friend. I then remembered that the model who gave me her number had told me that he saw her kissing another model. I knew it just had to be her friend. As her trip drew closer, I thought of ways to get back at her and decided on hiding her passport. One morning, I took her passport with me to work and hid it in my desk drawer. Her flight was on a Saturday afternoon, and I was working on some work documents when she cried out that her passport was missing. I could not pretend to not know where it was, so I pretended to be talking to my boss on the phone. After spending a full hour saying, "Alright," and "got it," I got off the phone and asked her if she was okay. "I can't find my passport." She was in tears, and I'll admit that I was pleased. I managed to calm her down and assured her she'd find it, but she needed to reschedule her flight first. We rescheduled her flight, and she mentioned going over to her friends to ask if she'd seen her passport. I nodded and she left. A week after, she gave up on looking for her passport and began the process of getting another. I broke up with her and told her it was because I could no longer take care of us financially. She begged, but I didn't listen. I just knew she only begged that much because she didn't want to go back to living with other people in a tiny apartment. I feel bad for OP that they had to witness multiple circumstances of this cheating, but at least it does put them in a good place as to reacting to it. The no tolerance. Honestly, I think people who are willing to try to forgive and move past it if you get cheated on are usually mostly just setting themselves up for even more heartache because once a cheater, probably going to cheat again. It's not a sure thing, but it seems very prevalent that it probably would happen again. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another crazy revenge story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories. X spread a rumor about me, so I sabotaged his competition. During my freshman year of high school, I was under the impression that dating a jock was the fast lane to popularity. No matter how plain and invisible you've been throughout your school years, you date someone on the football team and suddenly everyone knows your name. Everyone likes your hair and they want to be your friend. Then, from my sophomore year till my senior year, I confirmed this. I had lots of friends that got picked off one by the jocks of my school. Within the shortest time, they were all popular. Me? I steered clear of them athletes. Why? Because they were all jerks and all their relationships end the same way. They break up, and even when people don't know the whole story, they usually decide that it was the girl's fault. She either cheated or she slept around or was something else. And in the blink of an eye, all the love and adoration she had gotten morphs into hate. That popularity wouldn't fade off just like that. She'll still be known by everyone, but not as the girlfriend of a jock, but as someone who couldn't keep it in her pants. I once had a friend that had to change schools because of rumors like that, and I decided that I wasn't going to let anything like that happen to me. I kept that promise all through high school, but in my sophomore year of college, I broke that promise when Damien asked me to be his girlfriend. And as I've learned in high school, jocks are jerks. The dude cheated on me, and I broke up with him peacefully. Instead of him taking the L and going on with his life, he decided to spread a rumor about me, telling people that he broke up with me because I gave him an STD. I decided that two can play that game, and if he wanted to ruin my social life, I was going to take away everything he held dear. Which wasn't much, by the way. He only loved football. I spiked his drink with some illegal steroids and made an anonymous tip to the agency that drug tests athletes. But to fully understand the story, I have to give you a more detailed version. Let's start with how I met Damien. Summer break was over, and we all had to return to the horrors of schoolwork. I had spent the holiday with my best friend, Sarah's family. She lost her Nana, and I needed to be there for her. Getting back to the apartment after a 6-hour drive from Sarah's family home, all I wanted to do was crawl into bed and get some sleep. Maybe binge watch a few episodes of How I Met Your Mother when I woke up. Less than an hour after we got in, I was jolted awake by a loud knock on the door. I walked up to open it, and our mutual friend Tina walked in. She came to offer her condolences to Sarah, and after she was done, she invited us to a party that evening. I wasn't in the mood for a party, but I felt that Sarah needed to unwind and have fun. I knew she wasn't going to go if I wasn't going, so I said okay. I managed to catch a few hours of sleep before the party, and when it was time, we drove over to some apartment downtown. I decided to be the responsible one and not drink because I was going to be driving back home. So I left Sarah to let loose. I didn't know most of the people at the party, and because I was staying sober, I felt kinda out of place. Even Tina, who invited us to the party, was nowhere to be found. I wanted to leave, but Sarah seemed to be having fun, so I decided to stay. I make my way past the people in the living room and climb up the stairs from the balcony to the roof. It was the only silent place in the apartment, and I decided to chill there till Sarah was ready to go. A few minutes after I got to the roof, I was joined by a tall, muscular dude. His smile was what attracted me to him in the first place. He had such a wonderful smile. As he climbed the iron steps, he didn't take his eyes off me. It was a classic Doppler effect. That's a How I Met Your Mother reference in case you didn't get it. And I smiled back at him. Once he was up on the roof, he walked up to sit beside me. He was surprisingly confident, and that got a laugh from me. He said hi, raised his hand to shake me, and introduced himself. I took his hand and introduced myself too. He asked what I was doing up there on the roof alone, and I explained the situation to Sarah and how I have to be the responsible one. He commended me for my good work and decided that, to show his support, he wasn't going to drink for the rest of the night, and he was going to stay with me throughout the party. That was the type of mushy thing I tend to watch out for with guys. I had the mentality that guys only want to get with girls and they would do anything they had to get there. But there was something about Damien. Maybe it was his charisma or charm or just his boyish, carefree nature, but I was, how do they say, smitten by him? I said okay and that he was welcome to stay. We talked for what seemed like hours, and after some time, Tina came up to the roof to tell me that it was time for Sarah to go home. She had gone way past her drinking limit and she couldn't even walk in a straight line. I thanked Damien for keeping me company and I stood up to leave. He asked me if he could help by driving us home, but I declined. We brought our own car and I didn't have a drink at the party. If I didn't drive her home, then my not drinking at the party was a big waste. I thanked him once again and was about to leave when Damien stopped me once again. He asked me for my number and told me he'd like to see me again. I said okay and that we could set something up. Then I left with Sarah and Tina. A few days later, he called me and asked if we could meet up later that night. I said okay. When it was time, I got dressed and headed out to see him at a fast food restaurant. We grabbed some food and talked as we ate. By the end of the date, I was sure that I liked him and I wanted to see him again. We strolled all the way from the restaurant to my apartment, and when we got there, we decided to meet again in a few days. I told Sarah about the date. When she asked me what he was like, I told him what I knew. He was a final year business student, and he had siblings, and he loved cats. He didn't get to talk about himself a lot. He spent the whole time listening to me. I had no idea that he played football for the school, but I found out before the next date. I had to visit a course mate in her dorm, so I walked past the football field. The college team was doing their training, and I just took a side glance to see how they were doing. As I did, I saw Damien ordering some players to go long. I was really shocked, but mostly angry. I stormed off to see my friend in the dorm, and I went back to my apartment. Damien called me that night, but I didn't pick up. He tried calling a few more times after that, but I didn't pick up either. On the day we were supposed to hang out, I decided not to go, and when he called again, I ignored it. The next day, I was at home eating ice cream and watching a movie when Sarah came into my room and told me that some guy was looking for me. That was weird because I didn't know a lot of guy friends, unlike Tina, who knew almost every guy in school. I walked over to the door and opened it, and to my surprise, it was Damien. He stepped into the apartment before I invited him in. Then he asked me why I stood him up the day before. I simply told him that I didn't think we were a good fit and that we should go our separate ways. He didn't understand and asked me to explain further. I had to tell him that I don't hang out with athletes because, in my experience, they were all jerks. He told me he was different, which made me laugh. Then he told me to give him a chance and to just try him out. I didn't want to at first, but after 2 days of incessant calls and text messages, I said okay. We started dating, and at first it was nice. He was funny, thoughtful, and caring. He tried to introduce me to his teammates and friends on our first date, but I refused. If I was going to date him, it was going to be in secret. But Damien didn't like that. He wanted to, in his words, show me off to the world. After a lot of pressure, I finally succumbed to him. A month into dating Damien, he made our relationship public and introduced me to all his friends. Suddenly, lots of people knew me, in class and on campus. It was really weird for me because I wasn't the type to keep a large circle of friends, but still, I'm getting invites to more parties and many other people want to hang out with me. At one of these said parties, I went to get a drink from the bar. I had only left Damien for 1 second, but when I came back, he was seated with another girl, and it didn't look like they were just talking. I decided to play it cool and walk over to him. When I did, the lady turned to look at me, and for a second, she had this cold look in her eyes that kinda scared me. She stood up without a word and walked away. I asked who she was, but Damien waved her off, saying she was no one. I didn't press further, but that wasn't the only time I saw him with a strange girl. One time I came to see him at practice and he was talking to some cheerleader. That would have been okay if the girl didn't decide to sit on his lap. I walked. I immediately made my presence known by calling out his name, waving to him, and then walking away. He pushed the girl off his legs and ran after me. Then he explained that it wasn't what I thought and the girl was someone who slept around and had been trying to get with him. Every bone in my body told me not to believe him, but I haven't exactly caught him cheating. He deserved the benefit of the doubt, so I gave that to him. Well, it wasn't long before he showed me who he was. A few weeks after the first semester break, I tried calling Damien, but he wasn't picking up. We hadn't spoken or seen each other since school resumed, and it was unlike him. I decided to go to his apartment to pay him a surprise visit. When I did, I met that same cheerleader girl walking around the living room with a towel wrapped around her body. And Damien was only wearing underwear. I didn't bother to cause a scene or anything. That wasn't my style. I simply told him that we were over, and I walked out. He tried to call me multiple times after that, but I didn't pick up. When it got too much, I decided to block his number. After another few days, I started to hear funny things around campus. Random girls just walking up to me and asking how my health is, or some dude saying things like, "That's what you get for sleeping around." I didn't quite understand at first, so I met up with Tina, who was more plugged in than I was. Then I asked her what was going on. She told me that people were saying that Damien broke up with me because I gave him an STD. I had never been more shocked in my entire life. I asked her if Damien had debunked the rumor, but that was when she dropped another bombshell on me. Damien was the one spreading the rumors in the first place. I didn't cry when I caught him cheating. I didn't even cry when I broke up with him. But when I heard the lies he told against me to save face, I actually cried. I didn't break down though. I decided at that moment that he wasn't going to get away with it. Tina and I came up with a plan. She knew a guy who could help us get our hands on some illegal steroids. We drove over to meet the guy and get the drugs, then we had to wait for the next party where the jocks will be. I couldn't go because I didn't want it to look suspicious, so it fell on Tina to go. All she had to do was spike her club soda, flirt with Damien a little, and get him to drink some. When she did, she had to call me. The plan went on smoothly. I was at home watching a movie / pacing around when she called me to tell me that it went well. Next, I had to call an anti-doping agency. I googled them and got their number, then I gave him his location. That next day, I didn't go to campus, but Sarah, who went, told me how the agency came to the college. they invited most of the guys for an impromptu drug test. After they were done, Damien, along with 2 other guys, were tested positive for illegal drugs. I had nothing to do with the other guys though, but Damien was all me. I knew how much he loved football, and he was always talking about going pro, but that dream shattered after he was tested positive. He was kicked off the college team and banned from playing on any official team. That's what you get when you cross me. I mean, it sucks to see somebody's ambitions get killed, but when you're such a horrible human being, I think you're gonna have a hard time finding anybody that really has too much sympathy for you. So, is OP necessarily in the right here? Definitely not. But should OP lose sleep about this whole thing going down? I'd like to know what you guys think. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another crazy revenge story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.